Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. Well, good morning, Atlanta. Oh, it's afternoon. Forgive me. Good afternoon, everybody. Afternoon for everybody that's present today, and good afternoon to all of our people that are watching us virtually. We are so glad that you joined us, and welcome to the Rooted in Resilience Research Symposium. Give yourself a hand for being here. Come on now. Come on. This is so amazing. We're so excited that you're here. This concludes a 3-city tour that's really started in North Carolina as a pilot, but we are here ending out this tour. We was in Dallas, we were in the DMV area, and now we're here in the wonderful state of Georgia, and we are excited to be here. And the purpose is to make you aware of who we are and why we are, and that we are resilient people, and also to learn about the All of Us Research Program. So we are going to be here to educate, to rejuvenate, and all the things that we can do to bring your awareness and to educate you on things that you need to know about making yourself a champion for your own health. And as I just realized, I did not introduce myself. I am Jennifer J.J. Jones. I go by JJ, and I serve as the program lead for the Black Greek Letter Consortium. And what that is. The Black Greek Letter Consortium is made up of the Divine Nine, all the Divine Nine Greek letter organizations, and we have representatives from each of those organizations that is a part of a bigger team that goes around the country providing information on the All of Us Research Program and being champions of your own health. So we want to say welcome. We're glad you're here. And how can we start a program without doing a wonderful icebreaker, right? Yes, get excited about the icebreaker, all right? So we're here at Clark, Atlanta. And so there may be some of you who are from Georgia or from Atlanta. So we're going to do a quick roll call. And those that are watching us virtually, we're going to do a roll call for you as well. So you can put in the chat and call out what state or what city you're representing. I just want to hear about it. I don't hear you. Call it out. All right. Did someone say Connecticut, Tennessee? Houston. All right, Texas. I'm from Dallas. All right, homeboy right here in the house. Who else? What else? Who else we got? Illinois. All right, Illinois in the house. All right. Jackson State. I see you. I see you. Okay, we got some folks in the chat. All right, I see you. I see you. All right. Well, welcome to you all. And before we dive into what we're going to be doing today, we have some welcomes that's going to come from Clark Atlanta. So we have some representatives here from Clark Atlanta. Just want to say welcome to you and say hello as we start this day off. So we're going to bring them aboard. Ms. Adams is going to start us off with a welcome, official welcome from the university. Come on up, come on down now. I did stand up in my former life. Now I hear she is. There she is. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you. As stated, I am Danette Adams, the Director for Student Leadership and Engagement here at Clark Atlanta University. I also advise our MPHC. I would like to welcome you on behalf of Clark Atlanta University to this symposium on this very important topic of mental health. I hope you enjoy the panelists. I hope you enjoy being on our campus, and those who are with us virtually. I'm sure you will be informed, and this will be a great event and day. I think this is the end of the tour. This is Atlanta. Where else could you end the tour? And we are so happy to have you here at Clark Atlanta University, either in person or virtually. But on behalf of Clark Atlanta University, again, welcome, enjoy the symposium, and enjoy the rest of the weekend to the group. Thank you again.
And we also have some students from Clark Atlanta that's going to come out and say welcome to you as well. So bring on our students. Here they come.
Greetings and good morning, everyone who are joining us both virtually and in person. I am Autumn Epps, a senior with an administration major with a concentration in marketing from Baltimore, Maryland. I am a member of the Sweet Alpha Pi chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And to bring greetings on behalf of the 33rd Undergraduate Administration and student body, thank you all for being here, and we look forward to the rest of the program.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Cameron Randall. I'm a doctoral student in the Higher Ed Leadership Program. I bring you greetings on behalf of the graduate student body here at Clark Atlanta University. For over 100 years, our Divine Nine organizations have worked to uplift and strengthen our communities. COVID-19 pandemic showed us the need to invest in the equity of research and biomedical research. And so I'm Cameron Randall, this is Autumn Epps, and we're the 33rd Graduate and Undergraduate Administration.
Thank you and enjoy.
How you all doing? My name is Clemens Randall IV. I'm a graduating senior accounting major from Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm here just to welcome you all on behalf of Clark Atlanta University's MPHC, where I serve as the MPHC president as well as the president of the Psi chapter of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Welcome.
All right, don't be shy. Give them a hand. Okay, a few housekeeping things we want to take care of before we get started. For those of you who are here in person, if you did not check in, we have a check-in table to my right, your left, that we want you to check into. There's actually a QR code at the table that we need you to scan, and then you look up, there is a pre-test that we want you to take. And then once you take that pre-test, you will be given a raffle ticket for some things, some great giveaways that we'll have later today, throughout the day. And then for those of you who joining us virtually, in the chat, we're going to put the link to the QR code, because that QR code is to a link tree that serves as a host of information for you. Okay, so yeah, in the QR code, you will find the pretest. So again, for all of our virtual folks, we want you to go to the pretest. It's about 5 questions, takes about 2 seconds, maybe not 2, maybe 4, maybe 6. But we're going to give you a moment to do that. And then also it takes you to the Rooted in Resilience website. So if you go to that tree, that link tree, you'll get to our Rooted in Resilience website, which gives you all the information on all the cities that we have currently that we went in before prior to here, as well as all the information about what's going to be going on this weekend, because this is a weekend thing. It's not just today. We'll be doing a community day on tomorrow and a church service on Sunday. So go to that link tree. And then it also takes you to the All of Us Research Program website, which is another reason why we're here, for you to learn more about that program. So it contains that. And then there's also a virtual photo booth. So if you go to that, you'll be able to take a snapshot of yourself or your friends, your neighbor who you're sitting next to, and then you can be on the wall of fame, particularly for Atlanta. And when you go to the Rooted in Resilience website, you can see some of the photos from some of the other cities that we attended. So go to the website, go to the link tree, click, do your thing, get your picture, put it on the wall of fame. And also, all of this is being recorded today. So if you do not want to be recorded, if you're in person, I would say kind of stay away from the cameras. But we're also recording this virtually as well. So if you want to turn your cameras off virtually, you can do that as well. But we will be recording. Any questions about any of that? All right. I got all of that out the way. So now we're going to talk about. We've been talking about this is a research symposium. So we're going to talk about research and all of that good stuff and what the All of Us Research Program is all about. So the first step to understanding that is to understand the concept of research, health research in particular. So research is the process of finding out new things. Health research is the process of finding out new things about improving people's health and their health care. Did you know that the majority of health research has been conducted with middle-aged Caucasian men as the participants? Did y'all know that? How many of you knew that? Raise your hand. Okay. That means that medicine or treatment resulting from the research is designed specifically for that demographic. Communities who are underrepresented in medical research then are at risk of experiencing negative responses because it's not the best for their body. And I am a witness to that. And I didn't tell you that I've been working with this program, or the BGLC has been working with this program for 5 years now. And just as I began to work with this program, I was re-diagnosed with breast cancer. And what I learned by being a part of this program is this, that most of the research that's done is based on the average white male and not on me. And that explains why some of the medications and some of the things that they had me take did not work for me, because they were not designed for me. But because of this program, I was able to ask more questions with my doctor, my oncologist in particular, about what's going on. Why is you tell me to do all these things and it's not helping me? But now I understand that. And then I began to think, because of my knowledge of being a part of this program, I began to wonder why. More questions came. My mother, my father, my baby brother, my first husband, his mother and father all died of cancer, all of them. And so when my cancer reoccurred, my daughter asked me the question, will she get cancer as well? And I couldn't answer that question. But because of my reoccurrence, I had to take a genotest to see if this was hereditary. And what I found out is that not only was I not susceptible to getting cancer, but it wasn't hereditary. So because of this program, I began to connect the dots of why my cancer came back. It was environmental. And put a plug in there because we're going to talk about that. Going forward, we need to do a better job of including all types of people in health research. The only way we can fix this injustice is with your help. And part of the All of Us Research Program, again, we'll put a pin in that because we're going to talk about all of that. And I'll put a pin in this as well. What you remember and attain will help you later in the day. Just remember that. All of this that I'm saying is not in vain. It's because you need to know it, and because it may give you a little something at the end of the day or throughout the day. So what is the All of Us Research Program? The All of Us Research Program is led by the National Institutes of Health that's working to improve healthcare through research. Unlike research that studies the focus of one disease or one group of people, All of Us is building a diverse data set that can inform thousands of studies on a variety of health conditions. It is longitudinal effort to gather data from 1 million or more people living in the United States to accelerate research and improve health by taking into account individual differences in lifestyle, environment, and biological makeup. All of Us is the largest and most inclusive health research program ever. So precision medicine, let's talk about that. We're all different, right? But I love call and response. That's the people. But when we go to the doctor, our treatments are often the same. Our healthcare and treatment should be tailored for you. This is called precision medicine. Precision medicine is a new approach of improving health, treating disease, and finding cures. It acknowledges that a one-size-fits-all approach of medicine isn't the best because we know that what works to treat me may not work to treat you. Each person is different. Factors that greatly impact our health are our genetics, our lifestyle, and again, our environment. Ultimately, precision medicine can produce more accurate diagnosis, earlier detection, and better prevention strategies and treatment choices. So let me give you an example of precision medicine. That would be like my glasses. Some of you wear glasses, like this sister right here in the front row. So if I was to give you my glasses and you was to give me your glasses, they would not, I probably couldn't see, and you probably couldn't see through mine, right? That's precision medicine. When you don't take somebody else's eyes to the eye doctor, right? You take your own. So precision medicine is that when you are diagnosed with something, that all your holistic you is being looked at to find a cure, or even for preventive medicine as well. So that's what precision medicine is all about. All right, we're going to talk about determinants of health now. A growing body of research shows that centuries of racism in the United States has had a profound and negative impact on our community of color. The impact is pervasive and deeply embedded in our society, affecting where we live, where we learn, where we work, where we worship and play, and creating inequities in access to a range of social and economic benefits, such as housing, education, wealth, and employment. These conditions, often referred to as social determinants of health, are key drivers of health inequities within communities of color, placing those within those populations at greater risk for poor health outcomes. So here's the part where you can become a true partner or a true participant. Pull out your phones, I know you got them with you, and go to your Google Play or Apple App Store and find the All of Us research app. Everybody, you that are watching virtually, pull out your phone and you're going to go to the Google Play or Apple app or Apple Store app and find All of Us research. And so we're going to talk about what you need to know about to enroll. When you visit the All of Us website at joinallofus.org/together, there you can learn more about the program or choose to sign up if you're ready to do that today. Or you can download the All of Us Research app in the Google Play or Apple stores. You may notice when you go to All of Us apps in your app store, please be sure to download the one that's named All of Us Research with the all white background, created by Cara Evolution. So you may see two apps, but go to the one that has the all white background and is created by Cara Evolution. And all of these apps can be downloaded on your computer, your phone, your iPad, your tablet, all your social devices. You can't? Who can't? We're gonna come and help you with that. So enrollment and next steps. Once you've created your account, you will be asked to give your consent. This includes reviewing a series of videos which will provide more detailed information about the program. This describes all the types of information you may ask to give. Once you feel comfortable that you know what to expect, and if you're ready to give your consent, you'll electronically sign the consent form. You can do all of this from your computer, tablet, or smartphone or partner center. You may also elect to share your electronic health records, which is a digital version of your medical chart, and complete the consent to give DNA results. You will be asked to answer several health surveys in combination with your health information. The answers provided in these surveys can help researchers identify patterns about how your lifestyles and background affect your health. After these initial steps, you may be asked to share your physical measurements and provide your biological samples so that the program can help researchers better understand how different factors, including your genetics, make your participation unique. Call to action. Okay, again, we're gonna pause for a second and ask you to go to that site, locate it, the join now button to create your account, or know where to come back to it when you're ready to do that. So I'm giving you 5 seconds, but I don't want I want you to know where you need to go. So I'm giving you an opportunity if you downloaded that app to go find the website, right? So you'll know where to go later on to get all the information before you decide to become a participant. And then once you want to join, join. I had all my family to join. All right. Any questions? Any questions? No questions? All right. Well, we are gonna take a couple of seconds, like a couple of seconds break to give you an opportunity to view that website. So those that are joining us virtually, we're going to give you maybe 2 minutes because we're going to go move on to our next thing, which will be a panel. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. You that's here, go to the website. You that's virtual, go to the website. So you have 2 whole minutes to do that. Okay? All right. 2 minutes. I see y'all. Look at y'all working. I love it. Y'all are diligent. I love y'all are really looking at that. That's great. Look at y'all doing that homework. Hi there. How are you? Thank you for being here. Don't be right there. I'm going to introduce you. Wherever you feel comfortable. You go where you want to. Where you sit right there. You good? Oh, when you see anybody, sit down. Oh, okay. When we come back, I'll introduce you and then you can do your thing. All right, we are back. We are back. This is going to be an extraordinary day, and part of that is we're getting ready to be a witness to our Mind Over Matter mental health panel. So I'm going to introduce our moderator, and I feel so honored to do this every time I do this because this is a young man that's doing the things. In this day and age, we have some wonderful men that are here from Clark, Atlanta, who has stepped up, and I want to just give them a shout out for stepping up and being volunteers today. But this young man is amazing. He has a passion, he has a love for his community, and he's going to guide this panel, and you'll see what I mean once he gets started. So Jahil Thurman is a Chicago native and a Virginia State University graduate. Jaleel Thurman took his love for HBCUs and desire to broadcast positivity on those institutions to create Your Talk 101. Utilizing his vast communication skills, Thurman highlights HBCUs by emerging with current students and alumni, by highlighting campus activities and organizations from students' viewpoints. Your Talk 101 raises awareness of HBCUs and appeals to prospective students. Thurman's positive energy translates into a lively video that captivates audience beyond the campus and community. Jael Thurman is also the host and executive producer for HBCU 101, a television series about HBCUs that air on Aspire TV. I will turn it over to Mr. Thurman.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the introduction. Always make me feel warm and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Now, I did hear earlier someone said they was from Illinois. Yeah, Chicago? Okay. You see, that's what you're gonna get. You from Chicago too? Okay, all right, Southside. Okay. I'm sorry. I know we here for mental health. I'm sorry, but when I hear people from Chicago, I have to show some love, or Illinois in the building. All right. Well, hello everyone. I want to welcome you all to our Mind Over Matter panel conversation focusing on mental health. All right, we created this conversation because we really want to encourage individuals, especially those in the community of color, to be mentally fit for themselves, all right? And also understand all of the resources that are readily available to them, okay? Now, but before we begin, I want to send a special thank you and shout out to the All of Us Research Program for continuing to partner with us on this magnificent panel conversation, and shout out all of the work that they are doing within the field of research and health. Once again, my name is Jalil Thurman. Like stated earlier, I am the CEO and founder of Yard Talk 101, and I will be your moderator for today's mental health panel conversation, but I can't do it by myself, all right? I have some lovely ladies joining me today. A good friend, attorney, mental health advocate, Jade Mathis.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And then Associate Dean, Dr. Margaret Counts-Spriggs.
Hello.
Yeah, okay. All right. See, she get the Hall of Fame. They like, oh yeah. And then of course we couldn't do this without having a student represent the student body. All right, so Clark Atlanta University student and social work major, Ms. Kyra Roberts.
Good afternoon.
You know what? This is a Divine Nine. I am a member of the greatest fraternity of all time, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. So I will say that I do see that someone here might be on the other side of 1911. I don't want any problems. I'm just doing what I got to do. But I want to welcome you all. Thank you all for coming today. And let's dive right into it. Dr. Counts-Spriggs, a lot of times when we are facing challenges in this world, we tend to put them off, right? Whether it's physical challenges, mental challenges, all just everything. We procrastinators, right? But why is it important when facing a mental challenge to get help early?
Well, thank you. That's a very important question. And the reason why we should get help early is because if we don't, everything begins to compound. As college students, as young people, you are not just dealing with college, you're dealing with the day-to-day stressors. A lot of students have to face issues from family, they're dealing with relationships, they're dealing with adjusting to being away from home. So we need to begin to recognize that things are not right with us emotionally. Families sometimes have difficulty talking about sadness or feeling down. We've got this whole notion in the Black community, we could push through it, right? Push through it, get up, you can do it. And to talk to someone tends to be a sign of weakness. We look at it as weakness in our community, but I really believe over the past, I guess, since COVID started, I have seen a trend, particularly here on our campus, and I think this trend is going around the country, that our young people, you, have changed that dynamic. Young people are beginning to say, you know what, I don't feel right. This doesn't feel right. And they're starting the conversations with each other and with their families, right? Yeah. And so, why we need to begin to start early is so that we could attack those problems, attack those issues, so that we can go on with our lives, so that we can be productive. We have so many issues in our community that tend to pull us down. Mental health does not need to be one of them.
Yeah, Dr. Constance, you're getting us started early. All right, I felt that presence over there. You touched on so many different points, right? I think now in the spaces, I was having a conversation with someone the other day and was just saying that, even from a parenting perspective, right? Conversations that our parents had with their parents aren't the same conversations our parents are having with us, because now we're in a space now where we're talking more, and mental is something that we discuss and we start to have these different conversations. And to your point, as students, when you come into college, I think that's one of the biggest transitions. When you leave home, you're trying to understand how to navigate, you're trying to understand how to just survive. And I think now there's so many resources that we're able to just say, hey, I am not okay. All right. Now, Kyra, now staying on the student's perspective, we still battling this COVID-19 thing. Like, I was in the airport the other day and they out there with no mask on. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. All right. Now that's the airport. It's a little different, right? But as a student, how has COVID-19 had an impact on your day to day? And then how have you been able to manage? And then, what are some of your best practices?
As far as COVID-19, with my day to day, it on my mental health specifically, and it also has impacted people around me and their mental health as well. As far as what I do to challenge that mental health, thank you. As far as what I do to challenge that would be specifically making sure that I time manage my schedule and planning out things. When COVID first happened, the mask thing was definitely something different that I was not used to. Even having to move out of the dorms as quickly as possible was something that I was not used to when COVID first happened. But you learn to adapt to that. And a way that I specifically adapted to that was making sure I stayed in contact using the phone. So even though I wasn't able to go out with others or specifically interact with others in person, I was still talking to them on the phone. And that was the type of support that I needed for my mental health specifically. Now, as far as the day-to-day activities and some of the best practices, I did purchase a calendar to put on the wall, which makes me plan out my self-care days, what I'm doing throughout the week, and also if there are any events that I can attend or let others know about for their mental health as well. And just communicating with other people specifically as it goes with how they're battling their mental health and what they're doing can also help someone else. And when it comes to the methods that other people I know have used that I have not used specifically, Headspace and Calm are two specific apps that are meditation apps that you can use to revive yourself and your energy and to basically take a step back when you know that your mental health is not where it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That Calm app, I'm gonna tell y'all though, right? I have it, but do not do it too early in the morning, okay? Because you'll find yourself back sleeping. All right. But no, that is great. Now I do want to ask you. You did mention self-care days. What does your self-care days look like?
So self-care to each individual is of course different. For me specifically, getting my hair done, taking a walk in the park or getting my nails done, just taking time out for myself, doing things that I like to do, even just laying in the bed, watching movies is considered a self-care day for me, specifically when I know that throughout the week I had a lot of errands to run or a lot of assignments. So that's self-care for me.
I love that you at your age, right, as a college student, undergrad, have started to create that boundary, right? Because a lot of times we do not start there until we 30 plus, late 20s, maybe, and sometimes even in the 30s, it ain't happening, right? And so the fact that you're creating those boundaries is key because I think, as students, as entrepreneurs, as people in the workplace, we're always moving. And, at times we pour into others all the time. We pour. And to take a day to just watch TV and relax is, to some people, when I think they hear self-care, they think they have to do so many different things. And nah, it's really just a reset. It's just an opportunity to just chill. Like I already said, this weekend, don't call me. I'm chilling. I'm Netflixing and chilling, and that's that, but you have to do that to keep going, right? Now, that also helps to create something called work-life balance, right? Yes. Now, somebody said yes in the crowd. They say, yeah, we feel that. Now, Jade, you're an attorney. You could be quite busy traveling, doing all that good stuff. How have you been able to truly create work-life balance in your space? And why is it important for people to do that?
So I had to learn the hard way. I actually learned because I burned out at work and I had to take a mental health sabbatical for about a month. I was a prosecutor at the time, and my job was to pursue justice on behalf of the state of Maryland. But I wasn't able to do that because I had nothing to give. And I had to realize that you can't pour from an empty cup. So working 14, 15 hours a day, it may look good on paper, it may look good to my supervisors, but how does it look to me internally? And particularly someone who battles with clinical depression and ADHD, what an ordinary person may not be overwhelmed by could be 10 times overwhelming for me and shut me down easily. So what I learned after having to go on sabbatical is that I love, just like you said, I had self-care days, but my self-care days look like doing nothing, just existing. Particularly when you have depression, sometimes it's just difficult to exist. So I would sit there, I would binge watch TV, I would eat whatever I wanted to eat, I would go outside if I felt like going outside, or I would just do nothing and simply exist. So that's one of the things. Another thing is that you have to kind of know your body. So pay attention to if something doesn't feel right, if you feel a little different than you were feeling before. The seasons could change and that could affect how you're feeling as well, or your mood. But pay attention, and not only pay attention, but when you're starting to feel different, or if you notice a difference with yourself, your mood, your stress level, tell somebody. It's okay to hit the pause button sometimes and say, I can come back to this. Whatever this is, I can come back to it. But if I'm in a current state right now where I'm not functioning at my full capacity, I am no good to this, whatever this is, or myself. So I can't do anything well, if I am not feeling well. And lastly, it is okay to say no. It is okay to decline. It is okay to retract what you said that you would do. If you are unable to do something mentally, it's okay to say, I cannot do it any longer. I cannot make that commitment. I cannot commit to that. I know I committed to that, but I am unable to, to carry through with that commitment for personal reasons. So you have to know when you are working on overload or overflow, and you just need to take a seat before you tap out and burn out. And sometimes that looks like saying no.
May I add something?
You sure can.
I think one of the things that we also need to be aware of is that the rise of the pandemic brought this conversation forward for
Correct.
many of us, right? Mm-hmm. For many people, we experience issues of anxiety, but we never placed anxiety in the realm of a mental health challenge, right? But anxiety, when we are faced with anxiety, think about the times that you may feel anxious. Yeah. What the pandemic did is just took that to the next level. It raised our anxiety level to the point that we became even paranoid around friends and family. Yeah. Right? And so that compounded. And then being isolated on top of that, many people were alone during this time. And so and that anxiety coupled with being alone led to increased issues around depression. And people didn't even realize they were feeling depressed. Okay. So we have to recognize, I think one of the things that has happened is that, and I really applaud the, the, the staff here at Clark Atlanta University and our mental health services, is that they provided pretty much round the clock services to students. Who, even once we left the campus, they still provided that service. Students were calling, emailing. Our counseling team reached out, helped as they could, but but this whole pandemic has led us to have to realize that we need to begin to talk about our feelings, which sometimes we don't want to talk about, but it does relieve a lot of the pressure. The young lady shared what they do for their mental health day, right? Okay. We all need to take those mental health days.
Yes.
At least once a week. And it could be on a weekend if you can do it. Take that day for you. But also encourage your family and friends to do the same thing. You can do things together. A lot of families during this time got even closer through the Zoom network. Now,
Yeah.
at work, we get zoomed out. I mean, it's like, okay, I can't take another Zoom call, another Zoom meeting. But during the height of the pandemic, it
Yeah.
allowed a lot of families to connect, to have someone that they could, to see a family's face. We did it within my family. We had these weekly Sunday Zoom calls, and family members from all over the country would join in every Sunday just to touch base.
Yeah.
So, there are things that I think the pandemic has caused a lot of disruption in our lives, but it's also opened up new ways for us to relate to each other, and new ways for us to realize that we are stronger than what we think we are. Okay. But we have to, don't be reluctant, don't be hesitant to reach out and ask for help. People are out there to help you. So don't hesitate to do that.
You all just touched on a great amount of points that I really want to call out, right? So the first one is, Jade, you mentioned being able to say no, right? I think that's so important, right? I don't think people understand the value in just the words no and yes, right? Like, no, I can't do something. Yes, I can. And, in recent conversations with my mother, I talked to her about managing expectations. I said, when you manage expectations, it changes the ball game. And so I'm in an area of black and white with people, right? Like, if you stay black and white, and it's little room for gray, and it's easier to, from a mental perspective, because you know what you can and can't do, right? And I think that a lot of times we put feelings in these other gray things that then cloud judgment, and when in actuality we want to do something totally different. So but I also think when you manage your expectations, it helps from a mental health perspective. Now, I also wanted to call out the fact that, Dr. Count Briggs, you're an associate dean, right? And for you, I'm sure I would like for you to kind of even chime in from a work-life balance, right? Because you're dealing with students, faculty, family, so many different things, and over the years, right? Which I'm sure when you first started in education, you were all the way in. You know how we first get started, and I'm sure over the years, through experience, you've been able to kind of slow things down. And so, she said, "Nah, not yet." But I would like for you to, I would like for you to kind of chime in from your perspective of why it's important, because you have so many people that you give to throughout your day, that work-life balance for all of our educators and all of our people that's working in like social work and all these different spaces that have to give. Why is it important to have that for yourself?
Oh, it's so important. One of the things that I try to do in my life is keep a good sense of humor. Got to be able to laugh.
Yeah.
We have to be able to laugh at ourselves. You walk into a room and you forget why you're there. I'm like, okay, all right. You don't have dementia. It's not dementia. It's just, you just forgot. Okay. And so I've had to really focus on how to manage my work-life balance being home 24/7. I come on campus twice a week.
Okay.
I'm at home. I'm on, like I said before, I'm on Zoom calls pretty much every day, sometimes all day. I have a spouse who has a health challenge. He was hospitalized with COVID for 2 months, but he survived it. So I'm grateful for that. Okay. But then there's still some other health challenges that he has that I have to manage that. And where do I find myself? Where do I find myself in the process? I find myself I'm a knitter. I picked up the hobby of knitting. And I started this hobby about 6 years ago. And I noticed that during this time in my life, it has become my true relaxation. What gives me relaxation when I don't have to think about what to do next because my mind is making sure that I have this stitch right. So I don't have to worry. I don't think about when I need to just shut everyone out. I pick up my needles and I sit on my back porch, on my sun porch, whether it's winter, summer, or spring. If it's winter, I'll turn on the heater and I'll just sit out there and watch the greenery. We have deer that come up on our backyard, and sometimes the deer will come up and I'll watch them as I knit. Sometimes I'll go sit out on the fire pit. We established a fire pit 2 summers ago. And it's been a great thing to do, sit outside and relax and enjoy the environment, but also just to be able to breathe. And sometimes, and I tell my friends and my coworkers sometimes when I see that they're getting riled up, they're getting anxious, just stop, breathe, take a deep breath. Put a practice. There are several apps out there. I have Calm on my phone, and it'll send me a notice. Sometimes they'll say, I think it's time for you to just breathe. Okay. And when I see the notice, I'm like, okay, I can do this. So I'll take a minute of calm throughout my day. Sometimes a couple of times a day, just to breathe and relax. So that's kind of how I manage my work-life balance because the work doesn't stop.
Correct.
Okay. The challenges don't stop. But at some point, I still have to come down so that I can function and accomplish all of those tasks that I know I have to do.
I think the key words you said there was breathe, right? I don't think people understand the value of breathing, right? Like if you just, it's like, all right, okay, now you feel like, okay, now we can go and accomplish this. And breathing is so key. Now, Kyra, you didn't have to do a lot of breathing, okay? As a student, COVID, but then especially working in a social work space, right? There's a lot of challenges in that field. How have you kind of used your environment and your experiences to encourage your peers to be strong mentally?
Thank you for that question. As far as my peers and specifically my classmates and friends, I will say that social work has taught me a lot of techniques to prevent burnout, to tackle stress, to basically say no and create boundaries for yourself. Basically, when it comes to the stress or the challenges that you may endure as a student or as someone who just is going through a lot at that moment, basically, you want to take time for yourself, making sure, like what Dr. Counsberg said, you take a moment to breathe. And I will say, when it comes to those specific challenges, I do tell my friends, like, what is your stress? Address your stress first. Are you able to identify what it is? And if you're able to identify what it is, are you able to confront it? Once you're able to confront it, that kind of takes it to the point where you're able to tackle that and it will no longer be a stressor for you. Now, sometimes it is hard to confront it in that moment. So then you just create goals for yourself. Take it step by step so that you're able to get to that point where you can confront it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think a lot of times, we always moving so fast. And, I'm a firm believer of kind of like writing things down and crossing them off. And when I'm able to put something on paper, it gets it out of my head and I put it on paper. And then at that point, I'm able to then breathe, right? And then attack it little by little. And then now I feel more calm as things are starting to get tasked off. So I definitely agree.
I will say journaling is very helpful. So, writing down what happened throughout your week or what happened that specific day and reflecting on it will let you know where things are going wrong or what needs more improvement or where you are happiest. Knowing what those things are and what upsets you will help you to create those boundaries in order to move forward with your mental health and to promote positive mental health.
Yeah. Do you want to
Where
say?
were you at when I was in college?
I know, right?
I need friends like you. You probably were like 5 when I was in college. But I'm just saying, I really could have used a friend like you in college.
Oh, thank you.
Nah. I think, but you need friends like that, right? Like, because,
Sure.
earlier, Dr. Constance Briggs said that students are now talking about it. And Kyra's an example of someone talking and saying, hey, and giving tips, you know what I'm saying? And it's interesting because someone is in a social work field really understands that best. And I think had I known that, I talked to one of my friends earlier that's in social work, and she was like, this is what I do. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I think being able to do that and to where your friends are welcoming is important. Dr. Constance.
Let me just add this too. I want to respond to Ms. Roberts. Kyra has shared a very important aspect of what we do in social work. First of all, many young people, many African Americans particularly, have avoided interacting with health professionals, particularly mental health professionals, because most of them don't look like us.
Yeah.
Right? They don't look like us. So do you feel comfortable sharing with someone who really doesn't look like you, and you have this gut feeling that they really don't respect your concerns? And so what we're doing in the School of Social Work, I'm gonna just do a little ad for us,
Okay.
is that training students like Ms. Roberts, we have people like her going into the field. It helps to make people feel more comfortable. The more young professionals we train in the healthcare, mental health care, as well as in the medical field, all of the medical fields, it really will help change the platform, will change the attitudes that many people have about dealing with health professionals. There have been so many issues in the past, prejudices, there have been so many mistreatments. We all know of famous studies that African Americans were treated poorly, but we're trying to change that. We are changing that with how we train our young scholars today going out into the mental health field. So more and more people like Kyra, more and more students like yourself, okay, recognizing that using the media, right, using your podcast as a way to get that message out to young people, saying, or to anyone who's listening, we've got to take care of ourselves so we can do it together. Let's do it collectively.
Yeah.
And this voice is vibrating all over the country. So I thank you for taking that initiative and rallying the call around enhancing positive mental health in our community.
Well, thank you. I try to do what I can when I can. But to your point, so I've probably been in therapy maybe 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. And it was interesting because, this thing called life after college, right? I don't care what they tell you. Stay in school, right? Because life after college is its own beast. Navigating that space, and as a creative, and I got my degree in mass comm with a focus on television, and so a lot of times people would say, well, in undergrad it's easy, right? Because they looking at what we doing in our coursework, because it don't look like an engineer major, right? Or it don't look like a business major or biology, any of those other majors, right? But what they don't understand is how difficult it is after you graduate to even land in a position to grow, right? As an engineer major, you get through your 4 years, it's jobs for engineers. Like it's the STEM scholarships, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's so many different opportunities. And so, navigating that space can be quite difficult. And so I ended up going to therapy because I felt myself slipping into a space that I was like, I don't know if I need to be here, right? And so I was able to do that. But what you said earlier was that it's at times it's difficult because you don't find people that look like us. And so I was adamant on finding a person of color, and it almost honestly a woman. I was like, I'd prefer a woman of color. It's a different thought process, and I did, and it was interesting because then I had success, and I was able to be an advocate to some of my friends, and I'm like, look, I ain't gonna tell you what to do, but it's a little shaky over there. You might, it doesn't hurt to go. And I always tell people, people work out, right? They go to the gym, right? And it's always a conversation around physical fitness. Like go to the gym, work out, da 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 da. You look good, boom, boom. And I always say, well, it be people in the gym that's cut up, 6-pack, pectorals, muscles, crazy, and they still in the gym, right? Why? Because they're maintaining their physical fitness, right? And I always tell people, in therapy, even if you feel like you at a good place, keep going, because now you're just maintaining that mental health. I used to see my therapist twice a month. Now we talk once a month because I'm cool. But sometimes I be crazy and I had to tap in with her like, yo, Dr. Clark, let me holler at you right quick. Like, yo. But to your point, being able to find it is with people of color out there. So if you are having issues and that, trust me, keep looking, don't give up. And it's there. Now, I mentioned this real life thing, this transition. Jade, attorney, law school. You've had your own battles in which you mentioned earlier between ADHD and depression. How were you able to truly navigate this thing called life after college and have success in the career space with what you were battling? And then what tips do you have?
So my road was an untraditional road. I tell people all the time. I was actually diagnosed with clinical depression, ADHD, when I was 20 years old. And I was actually here at school in Atlanta, and I had to move back home to Detroit to get the proper treatment and care. But I decided at that moment that I was not going to let my diagnosis defeat or define me. And no matter what, I was still going to be successful. It was just going to look different for me than it did for everybody else. So I had to stay out an extra year. I decided I wanted to go to law school. My degree is in broadcast journalism too, but I wanted something to make me a little bit more marketable, and I can touch more people's lives. So I went to law school, but I took the LSAT and I failed it twice. And I applied to 6 law schools, and all 6 said no. So I took a gap year, and then I volunteered. I built my resume. I volunteered at juvenile detention centers. That's something I was interested in. I volunteered for local campaigns. I just did things that I was interested in and continued to study. And then I got in law school. So number one, I understood that it's okay if your route is different. You have to run your own race. You will get there when you're supposed to get there, not a moment sooner, not a moment after. And you have to give yourself that grace to understand it is okay. And if it doesn't happen right now, no does not mean forever. It means try another way. So that's the one thing I think I had to realize was give myself grace to make mistakes, give myself grace to not know. And my personality type, which a lot of lawyers, we can be perfectionists and we can A, B, C, D. And it's a lot of other, careers that you all may have or majors that you may have. But I had to be okay and be flexible with the unknown. So I think that was the hardest part for me, is adjusting to saying that I don't know what's going to happen next, but that's okay. Like, I think you have to, all these, whatever your friends are doing, and you hear that they have a wonderful job, or they're starting grad school and they're moving here and they're moving that's them, right? That's their road. Don't give yourself that pressure. I am still the same attorney that my other classmates were. It took me 3 years longer to become an attorney because I continued to fail the bar exam for 5 times. So for 3 years straight. But guess what? I was in the same courtroom as them, asking for the same law as them. So that is one thing. Give yourself grace, understand that it'll happen when it's supposed to happen. And that's the best advice that I have as far as the transition. Run your own race.
And yeah. I like that. Okay. Crowd participation. Okay. I think it brings up one of my favorite quotes. Success is failure after failure without the loss of enthusiasm, by Winston Churchill. And you really just amplified that and exemplified, in your efforts. If you failed a number of times, but you kept going at it, and eventually you'll get there. And then I'm also wanted to chime in on something that you said, other people's lives and everything like that. I'm a firm believer that it always works out. Like always works out. No matter what. Like you might be running late to work, you might be doing this, it might be moving crazy, but for some reason, the way this world works, it always works out, right? But I think that in the midst of all of that, your anxiety is risen and all these different things, and you have to tell yourself these things, and when you do, then you start to see, and now the world starts to slow down a little bit till you're able to manage it. And earlier, Dr. Count you mentioned depression and anxiety. I think a lot of times people think they're one, but they're really two. Can you kind of elaborate on the difference between the two, and what people can do in the early stages to overcome those battles?
Okay, so when we talk about anxiety, we pretty much can tell when we're feeling anxious. Um, One of the important things about this is to know your body. You need to know your own signs. Um, so if some people they have to, well, let's take this, speaking before an audience, right? A lot of students over the years, they would, oh, I can't speak in front of an audience, I get anxious. So what happens when you're standing in front of an audience? What is your body telling you? Are you getting a headache? Do you feel nauseous? Are your palms sweaty? Does your leg shake? What's going on? Are your hands shaking? What's going on? Um, many famous actors and actresses, celebrities will tell you they all have anxiety before they walk out to do their performance. They feel that energy. It's that energy that's built up inside of you. But then when it's showtime, right? So, but those feelings, we can feel something happening inside, that's biological. We can feel that adrenaline flowing through our bodies, right? With depression is that feeling of sadness. And if you're feeling sad every day and you're having trouble getting out of bed, you're sleeping in, you're losing your appetite, or you're overeating, and this goes on every day for 2 weeks, 2 weeks straight, you're depressed. But that's clear signs of depression, right? So here again, what do we do? Well, I'm gonna back up a little bit. A few years ago, I had the opportunity of being awarded a mental health awareness grant that we implemented on this campus. And as a result of that grant, I was able to train approximately 75 students and some staff around mental health first aid. And so with mental health first aid, one of the things, and the biggest thing is making sure that everyone who took the training with me knew that we weren't training them to be therapists, but to be observant, right? To be observant of your peers, to be observant of your friends, and most of these students that I worked with were residents, they were resident assistants. They are the eyes and the ears of the campus. Your resident assistants know everything that's going on in campus. Well, yeah, they should, okay, because they see it all. So we trained them around being able to recognize when their peers were not really in their normal state. Okay. So if someone walks into normally well groomed every day, hair in place, and one day they walk in class and they're totally disheveled, hair all out of place all over their head, clothes not clean, something's not right here. Okay. Um, Friends who begin to drink excessively or smoke excessively, cannabis or cigarettes, either one, okay? Those are signals that something has changed in their life. Kyra mentioned, so stop. So what's causing this? Are you stressed? What's causing this stress? What's causing your anxiety? Help people to identify exactly they may not know exactly what it is, but they know in the moment how they're feeling. Okay. So being able to talk to each other, talk to your peers, is a good practice. But as I said before, with depression, that feeling of sadness, hopelessness, just feeling like, oh, nothing's going to change. My world is not getting better. You're evaluating yourself compared to your friends, and you're thinking like, oh, everybody's doing way better than me. Something must be wrong with me. Woe is me. This goes on and on and on, and it's every day. Something's not right. Walk that person over to the counseling center. You know what? You want to call this number? I'll sit here with you because I don't know if I can help you, but if we call this number, you call it. I'll sit here while you're talking to someone, and they might can help you figure out what's going on. Okay.
Yeah.
So here again, sometimes we have friends who are taking medications that's causing this behavior, that's causing the sadness. So we have to be real cognizant and not just start, oh, this person is depressed. We have to look at everything that's going on in this person's life. And that's why we have professionals who can ask those questions. But know the difference between anxiety. Anxiety is that those physiological changes that you actually feel, heart racing, right? Your heart, you can feel your heart racing. You can feel your pulse racing. Something's causing that. What's trigger? What are the triggers? We have to begin to learn our triggers and picking up on that mental health literacy. So that's something that I think our counseling center is attempting to do, is to enhance the mental health literacy of our students on campus. So hopefully when we all come back in the fall, we can have a little bit more roundtables with students just to be able to talk about things that they're concerned about, because everyone wants to at least feel listened to. So those are just some tips. Know the difference between how you're feeling physiologically and those feelings of just like sadness and being down and not wanting to do anything. A person who's usually up and active and all of a sudden they're withdrawn, they don't want to go anywhere, they don't want to do anything, start asking questions.
Yeah. You gotta ask questions. You gotta have check on your strong friends, right? Ain't that what we see all the time? Gotta check on the strong friends. All right. Now, Kyra, in the space that you're in the knowledge that you've gained, I'm sure you've been able to truly understand best practices on how someone can improve their mental health now, and then what can they do on a consistent basis.
So there's a saying that I like to say, to each his own, similar to how the Count Spriggs was talking about. Basically, what is going on with you specifically may not be going on with someone else. You can't necessarily compare your situations. So with each individual, I would say basically to check yourself to see what's going on first. And then as far as the practice specifically, I would say that journaling, like I said before, self-reflecting on what's going on may help in that case.
Got you. And then are those things that you recommend on a consistent basis, or are there any other things that you'd add?
I don't necessarily practice too many mental health techniques, but based off of research that I've done and talking with my professors in the social work department and also my supervisor, there are other techniques that have worked, such as meditation, yoga, journaling, like doing journal prompts, also therapy, like how Dr. Count Spriggs and Jay were talking about. In the Black community, it's not really a thing to go to a therapist, and how you were saying you started seeing a therapist, and you continue to see one. That is so important, because you can't just go and think, oh, I'm better now, everything's going to be fine. It's a process, it's a journey, and it's going to come eventually all together, but it takes time, and you have to be willing to utilize that time to heal and to process everything. And I specifically would say, just based off of research, meditation is the number one thing that a lot of therapists have utilized, and also therapy in general is just something that people should invest in.
Yeah. And I got to get deeper into the medication space, but I have found that cardio is and working out is a great great space. Like running, walking, you know, you lose yourself when you get in a little groove out there, you know. So I've ran a marathon before, and so I run for quite frequently. And I do it more so not only to stay in shape, but it allows, like, I don't know what it does, you know, it allows me to really release certain thoughts, and then I'm able to think clear about, you know, a lot of things that are going on. So I always encourage people too to also work out if they can, if they're in a position, because I think that also plays a major part, because physical health and mental health kind of go hand in hand, you know. And so another thing that I think was, speaking of a hand, you know, we always got our cell phones in our hands, and we always checking TikTok and Instagram and Twitter
Stay away.
and all of that social media, right? And so that leads me to my next thing. Now, Jade, as a mental health advocate, I think, you know, social media can have a positive or negative influence on people. How should people manage social media to where it does not have such a negative influence on them?
One thing I always say, and my friends always laugh about, is that I am the queen of deactivation and blocking. Like, sis ain't got time. I really don't. I really do not. Like, I'm not going to argue with you on social media. I'm not going to argue with keyboard thugs. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I will block you or I will deactivate. And what I personally started doing, especially around the beginning of the pandemic and all of the Black Lives Matter movements and the insurrection and everything, I was noticing, I would take inventory of how I felt before looking at all this stuff online and reading it and watching people engage on these social media platforms about it, and after. And I never felt better. I always felt worse. I always felt low, and I couldn't pinpoint. And even sitting there scrolling, just watching people live these fictitious lives a lot of times that may appear real, but they aren't. And then you're comparing yourself, and then you just feel even worse. I just started saying, let me take inventory of these feelings. And when I would space out and just say, okay, well, I'm not going to use social media this day. I'm not even going to look on it, you know, or I would deactivate for like 6-7 months at a time. Like, if things just seemed really, really heavy and I needed to just clear my head and focus, I would just deactivate my page. And when I tell you, I felt so much better. So I think that social media can be used for good purposes as well. You know, keeping in touch with your family and friends, connection, getting, like, I do my mental health advocacy on there now. So it could be used in a positive light, but you have to know yourself best. And again, like you said, you have to know your triggers. So for me, a trigger can be taking too much of anything in that does not, I guess, serve a greater purpose for me, or that's not helping me grow. And if that's how when I walk away and I don't feel growth or I don't feel productive, then I limit my social media intake. And then I don't check my likes. I turned off my like factor. I turned off my like. I'm going to turn off the comments. So because I don't care what you say. So I don't need the validation of social media. So I just turn off all that stuff because I can care less, because I validate myself. So
I think that's huge right there, right? Like, I think I didn't even know you could turn your likes off or your comments. Well, I knew about the comments, but not about the likes, right? But I think that's a great way to manage, right? And create your own boundaries and your expectations, because then that way people ain't in your bubble, in your space, and keeping, you know, because that kind of sprays when I said social media, she said, don't even get on it. Don't even get on it. I seen it. Now,
I do occasionally. I'm not gonna. I do. I have a social media account. It's one way that I do connect with family and friends. But I like what she said about turning off the likes. You know, validate yourself.
yeah.
You know, I don't need 10,000 people to say I'm okay. You know, I don't even need 5 people to tell me I'm okay. If I know I'm okay, I'm good to go. Okay. And if I feel it in here, then I'm good to go. And that's what I try to do. I just try to help myself get to where I need to be.
Yeah, and Kyra, you know, I want you to chime in on it too, because as a student, it's a little different, you know, like, you know, I remember when 2012, when Instagram really was, when it was just for photos, right? And it wasn't even what it is now, right? And I've seen Instagram go from just the photos with the filters on it to posting to what was it, Vine? Vine had videos. They bought out Vine and added the video feature, and then, like, it's grown tremendously over the years to where now students like social media, everything, TikTok, all that. Like, how do you manage?
I'm on social media every day. I'm going to be honest. But for me, and I do recommend this to other people, if you see something that you don't like that somebody's posting that you follow, or if you are aware that something that is being said to you from a specific account is not in your likes or promoting your positive mental health, I would say to basically block them or unfollow them, that specific account, because it's not doing any good for you, similar to what Jay and Dr. Count Spriggs was saying. But for me specifically, I like to take time off every now and then to declutter from social media. So the people that I follow are uplifting, doing things positive, sharing resources that I can use, that I can share with other people. So that's why I am on there. But I will say it's not the best now that we do have so many different changes to social media. And that a lot of people are able to compare themselves to others and see what other people are doing around the world and thinking, oh, I'm not there, so maybe I'm not doing something right. And that's not always the case, because it's social media, so it can be fake. Right. You never know if something is as real as it seems because it's just a picture. So trying not to basically compare yourself to others, and also taking that time away from it.
Yeah, I think being able to look in the mirror and be self-aware of those things is key, right? Like yourself, I follow, a couple different pages, but like some of them specifically are like uplifting, or as an entrepreneur, you have your ups and downs, and so you need some inspiring posts or motivational posts. And I found myself kind of like following not only like those type of pages, but even like individuals that are always kind of promoting that type of positivity, because you just never know. Like, you might just hop on social media just to check, right? And then boom, that first thing you'll see can almost kind of like be positive or negative, and it can then dictate kind of like your next mood. And so to limit that interaction is amazing. I'm happy to hear that all of you are saying that, and I'm hoping that if you all aren't, that you're taking some tips to block that one person that you've been wanting to block, but you've been skeptical about blocking them. So, yeah, now I think, as individuals, right? Earlier I said check on your strong friend, right? I think as friends, as family members, we're always wanting to be there for someone. We always want to be there as a lifeline, as a resource, to be able to help listen. A lot of times, sometimes we might be the person that people unpacked on, or whatever the case may be. Dr. Cal Spriggs, I want to ask, how do you show up for someone that's experiencing a crisis? A friend, a family member, associate, whatever.
By being willing to listen, and to not try to solve whatever the challenge they may be experiencing for them, but letting them talk through it. And if it's a family member and even a friend, I would refer them to professional help. I'm not the one. I can't, I might be able to work, and I'm not a clinician. I've been teaching in social work now for a few years. We won't get into the numbers, but for a few years, but I've done counseling, I've done casework, I've done some therapy, but I'm not a therapist, so I don't claim that. But I am a good listener, and I'm a very good observer. And so with those skills, I'll mention to a family or friend, you seem a little off today from your normal. I will send positive messages out to my friends and family. Just a reminder that they are loved, that they are important, not just to me, but also to someone else in their lives. So that's really how I show up. And I encourage them to have fun. I said before, I love laughter. I love humor. I love music, all types of music, from country to classic to whatever. I listen to it all. Some rap I can't handle, but some of it I do like. Okay, so but I try to encourage people to find those things that make them feel good about their place in the world. And so I admire people who, like yourselves, who put themselves out there, who are willing to share their stories.
Yeah.
So that sometimes someone hearing your story can help them realize, oh, okay, so I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not the only one experiencing this. So if they can do it, maybe I could make some adjustments. I can talk to someone as well. So I admire what you and I have gone blank on your name, Jay, have done. So that's kind of how I show up for my family and friends, and even for my peers that I work with every day. I think one of the best things that came out of all of this pandemic and COVID was what D Nice did with his music.
Yeah.
I think during that first year, that March of 2020, when he came out with that quarantine,
The club quarantine.
Club Quarantine, I was out there too. I was on my back porch, me and D Nice, right? Having, just experiencing that moment of release,
Yeah.
right? So, how we show up for each other is important.
Yeah.
Listening, being observant, and saying, you know what? I would suggest you call someone. I would suggest you talk with someone. I'll be here to listen, but I'm not going to be the person to help you solve it.
Yeah, I think, definitely being able to not try to take it on yourself, because you may say something that could be triggering. You may say something that doesn't really help, right? And it's always tough. But to your point, I find myself, it's interesting. So I'm in a group chat with my grandmother and her kids, basically. My dad, my aunts, and myself. So I'm the oldest grandchild, so I kind of get the pass, right? And, every day my grandmother puts, like, she's a pastor, so she puts some spiritual stuff in there, and we say good morning. That might be the only thing sometimes we say. Sometimes we be cracking jokes all day. And I found myself this morning saying, hey, good morning. I know I told y'all yesterday. I just wanted to remind y'all that I love y'all, right? Because I don't know it just was like, yo, just let them. So when you said, yo, just telling people you love, you care about them, I'm also a firm believer that if someone comes on your mind, shoot them a text. Like, for some reason they came on your mind, on your heart, shoot them a text. And just say, hey, I was just thinking about, just want to check in. That's it. You ain't got to get too crazy. You ain't got to, but you never know what that text message may do for that person. And before we open it up for Q&A, Jay, from your perspective though, how can we be proactive about our mental health, and then our mental health of our family members and friends?
So that's a good question. I think what we're doing here today is a great start. Programs like the All of Us Research Program. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is key, right? So the more you know, the more you are accustomed to, the more you are coming to events like this and you're joining programs with that, it's focusing on, number one, disenfranchised communities and communities of color, right? They're coming and doing the boots on the ground work and creating safe spaces so you can know your history and your family's history. So for me, when I found out, when I was diagnosed at the age of 20 years old, I didn't know really what depression was. I didn't know if it was hereditary. I didn't know if it was just me who had it in the family. I had no clue what it was. So it took me a long time and with my doctors to discover exactly where it came from, how we can treat it, what medicine worked best for me. That probably took 2 or 3 years. And that could have been bypassed had I known some of the historical information about clinical depression. Had I known what treatment worked best for clinical depression, I wouldn't have had to go through so many trials and errors. So I think just learning about it and then destigmatizing it, having events like this where you can sit and be comfortable and be candid and destigmatize the notion that the mental health is the crazy person or getting the crazy check or the crazy uncle in the room. Talking about how a person with the mental illness can look like me. And a lot of them do look like me, but I'm still high functioning. I'm still successful. So I think what we're doing here in this room definitely opens up the platforms and opens up, experiences for people to be more candid about mental health in our community particularly.
Yeah, I think we got to be candid, have the conversations, and I'm very appreciative for today's conversation and the conversations to come. And so now what I'd like to do is definitely open up for any Q&A, any questions that the audience may have about anything that we've said or any thoughts or anything that they want to put. I'm not sure also if we have any questions virtually. I'd love to open that up. Oh, okay, we got a few virtually. Now, y'all that's in the audience, don't be too shy either now. Okay, all right.
Okay, the first virtual one is if I have a loved one who's showing signs that they haven't acknowledged and they don't want and they need help, or if they don't want help, what steps should I take?
That's a tough one.
That is a tough one because one of the things about dealing with not first of all, mental health is a condition. Okay, it's just like if you've got a heart condition, you've got diabetes. Mental health also falls in that category. It's a health condition. Okay, so but people have to be open to recognizing that something's different. Um, so one of the if you just kind of help a person, if they're talking about a situation, I might ask the questions. Well, how does that work for you? Okay. So whenever you're in this situation, what happened the last time? How was this situation the last time? You noticed any change? And sometimes they'll recognize, well, nothing's changing. Well, so if nothing's changing, are you willing to try something different? Okay. Um, so, but that's really difficult because if a person doesn't recognize or refuses the help, and depends if they're not a harm, if they're not a threat to someone else or to themselves, there's very little you can really do, right? Because they have to be open to going into those other directions for change. But I would say just encourage yourself by engaging them in conversation about, so how you handle this. I mean, is it working for you? Or whatever the challenge may be, the way you're handling it, is it working? Are you willing to try something different? What have you thought about talking to this person? Here again, going back to finding someone who looks like them as an option to talk to is around therapy could be very helpful. Um, Going with them, and if people are open, then it's easier. But if they're not, and if they're not doing bodily harm to themselves or to anyone else, then it's really a challenge. But I would not give up. I would continue to listen and be there. I would not chastise them. I would not blame them. I wouldn't argue with them. Those things I would not do. But I would just kind of like, seems like this problem keeps reoccurring.
Yeah.
So have you thought about other ways that you might want to tackle this? I'll go with you and talk to a counselor or a therapist if you'd like. But let's see if we can find a different way to solve this. And it may help. It may help, and it may not. And someone else.
I think in that space too, it's always about a suggestion, right? Like I got, I don't mean to get astrology on y'all, right? But I got some of my best friends are Geminis, all right? And one thing I've learned about a Gemini is you cannot tell a Gemini what to do, right? It's not that what you're saying isn't maybe right or a great idea, but it's how you say it to them, right? And so I've learned that just in general in conversation, to your point, Dr. Conspriggs, is make a suggestion, don't pressure, right? Okay, today you're not, okay, cool, we're gonna keep going, right? And then 6 months later, because I think a lot of times people have to go through experiences to be open and willing to be receptive to what you're saying. And so my best friend, we talked therapy in the beginning. It was okay. A couple months later, still okay. And then one day it was, yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna check it out because I had success. And he was like, okay, cool. And he was like, yo, it was one of the best things. Thank you for not giving up on me. And I think that's a major key.
And I'll just add in briefly. I always tell people in any situation, read the room. Even if it's your friends, your families, whoever it is, if you try to have a conversation or you can feel like they're a little antsy, leave them alone before you get cussed out, your feelings hurt, or lose your friendship. Maybe you can catch them when they seem like they're a little, softer or lighter another day or another month or another year and say, how you feeling? Well, maybe this can. And if they still seem opposed to it, read the room and leave them alone.
Let them be.
Another question is, how can student leaders who have influence on campuses assist in addressing the topic of mental health?
Oh, I think that's for you right there, Kyle. That's a student question.
I would say having events like this, hosting events like this, also finding resources within the community that you can reach out to basically learn more educational approaches such as mental health, because everyone doesn't know what mental health is in the first place. So you have to raise that awareness and increase that knowledge about what it actually is. So that has to start with someone, and I would say student leaders can start having events like this to open that discussion.
Yeah, and as a former SGA president, I have to agree with you on that because, you got the juice, between the Divine Nine and other Greek-led organizations, between certain social orgs on campus, SGA Royal Court. We have influence not only the students, but also the faculty, right? And those student leaders are able to bridge the gap. And I think that, to your point, you have to be willing to have those conversations, and then people will come out. If the Greeks throw something and they got a little food in there, because some people, they swipes ain't working no more, and they need, they gonna come for the food. Like I did an event, and I have a prime example. I did a mental health conversation with the Alphas at Virginia State, and I partnered with the College of Grad Studies and the counseling department, and we had a tremendous turnout because the Alphas had the juice at the time. And so they were able to get people, and then counseling departments and all these different people, we came together as a collective, and we had food. So of course everybody came for the food too, and we was able to have great conversations. Before you go, did you all have a question? I see you guys matriculated from the back to front, so I figured we could get that.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, like, when you are starting, like, on your own mental health journey, I guess, and like healing and things like that, what are some tips that you all have about like setting healthy boundaries and like, with the people in your life around you? Because of course things are changing in your life, and you're not going to be the same person that you were, especially as you're trying to heal and get through. So how do you, or what are some tips just about like setting those healthy boundaries and then like standing firm in them and then carrying them out?
I think Kyra said something earlier, and that was I learned how to say no. Say no to negativity. If the energy is negative, walk away from it. Find keep yourself balanced and focused. Keep your energy in a balance. So you're starting your journey, so what's making you feel bad and what's making you feel okay. So if that energy, you feel that energy. Going back to what I said about those physiological feelings, you feel it. You like, oh, something she or he said hit me the wrong way. I think I need to back away from this, right?
Yeah.
And come back at it another time. But follow your boundaries, set your boundaries, know what you will tolerate and not tolerate, what kind of energy you want around you. So that's one way of enhancing your boundaries, and I'm sure the other panelists have other suggestions.
Yeah, so as a person who deals with clinical depression, it's ongoing. That's something that I'm going to deal with the rest of my life. So it's important that I implement self-care at all times. I am a queen of disappearing. I would disappear on my family, on my friends. My parents have to leave me voicemails like, if you don't pick up, I'm calling the police to your house. And that I'm like, okay, I'm fine. I just don't want to be bothered. Like, I'm doing what makes me feel zen, what makes me feel at peace, what I like to do. I don't want to hear your opinions. I don't want to hear, it could be good, it could be bad, whatever. I don't want to be bothered. And you're gonna have to respect that. And when I resurface, I'm gonna act like everything's okay. Like, I don't owe you an explanation. Sometimes if I care, if it's who depends on who it is, I might be like, I was in one of them phases. It was that time. It was dark. Or I might just be like, girl, I was, shopping clean about what you talking about. I was out of town. Like, whatever I want to say, whatever I feel like is appropriate, whatever I feel like you deserve, or I owe you, or I don't owe you anything. It's my life. I'll disappear and I'll reappear when I feel better and when I feel like entertaining.
I just wanted to add to that. So the way that you set your boundaries would be to first identify what is your actual boundary and acknowledge it, and then understand why that is a boundary. What did they do specifically? It could have been triggering. It could have been something that you just don't like, or it could have been something that went against your values or beliefs. So once you know your reasoning for why, communicate that. So then you communicate with the person and see if they are willing to, change to accommodate you in your boundaries. If they're not willing to, then yes, I would say leave them alone and walk away from that specific situation. But you have to communicate that first, because sometimes people don't know.
Yeah, I had to add to that. Communication is the key in all relationships and anything that we do. And earlier I mentioned like really managing your expectations, right? And not just your expectations, but creating an expectation for people to be able to manage when it comes to you, right? Like, this is what you're gonna get from me, all right? Don't ask me for more. This is it. And if you can't, hey, this is black and white. And I've learned that that's the best way. Like, one of my good friends, he's a teacher, so he'd be up at 5 or something early, dumb early. So I know after 9 o'clock, I'm not even gonna hit him because I know he sleep. But that's an expectation, a boundary that he like, yo, come on now, Lil, I'm sleep. Like, what's up? Like, but if you don't have friends that respect that, like when you communicate these things, then that's something for you to pay attention to and be like, you know what, you my friend, but I might have to keep you at a distance because you don't respect and understand what it is I'm saying. But also, I think too, is show them that you'll respect their boundaries as well and make them feel comfortable. So that way that you both pouring into each other, and it makes it easier to have those conversations. Were there any other questions from the audience? I know we had a few more online. Yeah. Go ahead, come on.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Alicia Russey from TREP. I have an introspective question for all panelists. How does your faith play a role in managing stress as well as stressors? That includes people, places, situations, or things.
Oh, she brought the F word in here. Faith. I'm gonna let you start off. We're gonna work your way back. Yeah.
Okay. Faith for me is important. Sometimes we don't even realize that it's faith that's driving our course through our day. But I'm not a avid churchgoer, but I feel it in my heart. Okay, I feel it here. I feel that tingling sensation when something just goes to my soul. Okay, so faith is important. Um, I believe in the good of people first. Okay, I think all people have the potential to be good until they show me otherwise. Okay, so that's the first thing. And I come from my family. Born and raised United Methodist. I guess that's why I'm at a United Methodist school. But I was born and raised United Methodist. Faith was always a part of my environment as a child coming up. But as I became an adult, I began to learn the difference between faith, religiosity, and religion. Okay, and so I began to just center myself, and I believe in an almighty power. I believe that there's something in the universe greater than me, and I am a part of that connection. So I believe in the connection of human beings, to mankind. I believe we have a relationship with our environment, whatever that is. Okay. So faith to me is important. I'm a spiritual person. I pray. My prayer might not be traditional, but I have my own way of praying. Okay. So meditation, prayer, they're all, to me, they're the same. Okay. So, that's how faith. And so when I don't impose my faith on others or my beliefs on others, because I believe every individual has their own stance in the world and how they center themselves. So, but I will respect others' faith as long as, and even if they don't respect mine. But faith is important to how I interact with my family, my friends, and my relationship with others. And my relationship with God is one of me feeling connected to others in the universe. Therefore, I'm connected to God, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense.
So, some of the fruits of the Spirit are joy, peace, love, long suffering, grace, all of that good stuff, right? So, when we think about that, especially as believers, and I'm a believer, that doesn't just stop when you leave the church doors. And when I speak about mental health, I would say 60% of the speakings that I do with my crowds are faith-based community, because I want them to understand that you can have a mental illness and you cannot pray it away. You have to treat it like any other illness. But all of those fruits do not stop when you leave the church. They carry on. So for me, they carry on into my life when I deal with other people, when I interact with other people. When I was a prosecutor, I took those spirits, that kindness, that grace, that love, that patience, that long suffering. I took that. But most importantly, what I had to learn to do, and I'm still learning how to do this, and this is a daily dying, to myself and in my flesh, is that giving myself those fruits, that love, that peace, that patience, that long suffering. When I get up in the morning and I don't feel well, when that, depression is telling me one thing and I have that fog, it's okay, Jade. It's okay. Give yourself that same grace and that love to say, I'm going to lay it down today and I'm going to start again tomorrow, because you're human.
Yeah. Kyra, do you want to chime in? Or you good? Okay.
So I'm big on faith as well. And I'm a high believer in everything happens for a reason. It may not have happened the way you wanted it to have happened, but it happened for a reason. And you were put in that place for a reason. And as far as how I go about interacting with others or situations or the environment, I always consider what someone else may have been going through. So if they talk to me nasty, or if they had an attitude, or if something went wrong and they just didn't know what to do, I consider that, because you never know what someone else is going through at that moment. And you always want to give them grace, regardless of how they may have talked to you. Just always being kind, like Jade said, the kindness, the love, the grace, all of that plays a role when it comes to faith and when it comes to how I interact with people.
Yeah, giving people grace is key. Giving them grace, giving yourself grace in the faith. So as an entrepreneur, that to me might be the ultimate faith journey, right? You betting on yourself every day. You don't work, you don't eat. It's different. And when I made a decision to do that, my grandmother, like I mentioned earlier, is a pastor. So we talk every week, to as a check-in from a spiritual space. She gave me scripture, she gave me all these things. And what I've found is that there's certain scriptures in the Bible that kind of can help you keep going. From a faith perspective, right? So, like one of them, as an entrepreneur, it's Psalms 24 says, "May He give you the desires of your heart, and make all your plans succeed." And so, when you really let that meditate on it, it's like, okay, all right, you just said everything happens for a reason. Earlier, I mentioned that it always works out, right? And so then that's what I remind myself, especially when my anxiety starts to get crazy. I'd be like, nah, hold on now, player. Where you at today ain't where you was at last year. And I found myself starting to get even deeper from a faith perspective. Like, man, you right. Because 2 years ago, I was there. Now I'm here. And it's like, what only can get better. And so then your faith gets stronger when you start to get to the other side and just really, truly trusting that it always works out. That's a thing I've learned as life has gotten a little slower for me. It makes it a lot easier. And so I don't know if we have any last questions before we wrap up. You have one? Go ahead.
Hi, this one is specifically for Miss J. I don't know if this you can hear me.
We can't hear you though.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just raise my voice then. This one is specifically for Miss Jade. So I remember you saying you didn't have
Call
a
me Jade, girl.
traditional,
I'm young. No, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm just playing.
a traditional school education. I don't either. I'm 22. I'm sophomore. I started super late due to COVID. So how do you become okay with not having a traditional path specifically, and less for me, less comparing myself to others, but knowing that pretty much every step you take is disappointing other people.
You said each step you take, what was the last part?
It's disappointing other people.
First thing I had to do was stop worrying about what other people thought or what other people had to say or how they felt. This was my life, right? And my journey. And the thing is that it wasn't by choice that I had to go a non-traditional route. And most people, it's probably not by choice. It's by life and by happen circumstance, right? Life happens to us all. I didn't ask to be diagnosed at 20 and have to withdraw from school and go through all of these things, but it happened to me. Some things may have happened to you that you had to take, your road could not be what a traditional road could be. And that's what you have to understand is that I'm still in the fight. I'm still in the race. No matter what happened to me, I didn't drop out of it. No, I won't look like you running this course, but we're going to make the finish line together, right? Even if I make it later than you. And so one thing that inspired me is that my office, I was a law clerk for 3.5 years because I couldn't pass the bar exam, while people who went to law school with me or graduated after me were becoming prosecutors all around me, and I was still taking the bar exam. So when I passed it 3 years later on my 6th try, the head prosecutor appointed me to this program. She was just starting, and it was above all of the other prosecutors who had been there. My salary was higher. I was my own supervisor, and I started off in a different court. And she said, that's because I sat there and I watched you take that exam over and over and over, and you still showed up to work. You did a good job. You kept a good attitude, and people are watching you when you don't know it. So to me, I was accelerated because of that. So like I said, look at yourself, and you have to pat yourself on the back sometimes and be like, well, if other people was going through what I was going through, let's see if they would hang in. Probably not. You know what I mean? Probably not. So yeah, I may be older, but guess what? You get there when you're supposed to get there, and it's probably going to be accelerated. And mine sure was. So you'll get there, sis. Hold on.
And I'll add to that before we wrap. Two things. One, whatever spiritual belief, power, whoever you believe in, I'm a firm believer that God will never give you anything until He's ready for you to be successful. He doesn't want to see you fail. I remember I heard TD Jakes say one time, why do you think you don't drive at the age of 10 or 9 or as a kid, right? He said that the car is ready, the road is ready, but you're not ready. And he said, why you don't think you don't get the keys till you like 16, 17, 18? It's because at that point, you're ready. The road is ready, the car is ready, and you're ready. He said you have to look at opportunities in your space. God was like, yo, if I give this to you now, you may not be ready, and I don't want you to fail. So he gave it to you at the time he's supposed to give it to you. And everybody says in this life thing that life is a marathon, not a sprint. What I'm gonna tell you is someone that actually has ran a marathon, anybody that runs, they'll let you know that mile 1, you feeling good. It's the first one. It's the warm up. About mile 10, your body like, ooh, wee. And then you might be back in a groove at mile 17 and 18. And it's just all that is saying is just keep going. Each day is different. Each month will be different. Each year will be different. But as long as you keep going, you'll finish the race, and then another race will begin. You get the medal, you're going to feel good about yourself, then you're going to be ready to embark on something else. And so I'll close on that, and I just want to say on behalf of the Rooted in Resilience team, I want to thank all of you virtually for tuning in, all of you in person for tuning in and coming and joining in today's conversation. Jade, Dr. Cal Spriggs, Kyra, thank you all for just the insights that you all been able to do, opening up about your lives, what you got going on. And I'm here to say it's okay to seek counseling. Please, 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 if you ever feel that you need to, it's okay. And check on your strong friends. Check on all your friends. All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you. That was amazing. And again, thank you all for sharing, for, bringing the knowledge to us. We appreciate you so much. One of my favorite quotes is, give yourself to yourself before you give yourself away. And this is what you're saying. And I totally agree with everything that y'all said. So give them another round of applause. And thank you again for being here. All right, good people. We're going to have our first drawing of the day. Are you ready? You have your tickets? You have your tickets? You have your tickets. Everybody got their tickets. Okay. I'm going to shake them up and I'm going to draw it. All right. The number is the last three numbers: 647. 647. All right. Come on up. Retrieve your gift. Come on. Come on. Come, 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 come. Make haste. Make haste. Come on. I want you to come up here because I want you to tell them what you received. Tell them what you received.
Oh, $50 gift card. Thank you, guys.
All right. Just saying. Just saying. Thank you. So more to come of that. So thank you so much for your patience. We're going to transition to our next speaker. So we will allow our guests to exit the stage as we get ready to prepare for the next speaker. All right. Thank y'all. So again, for those of you in the audience, All of Us Research Program, you can go to the website at joinallofus.org/together. And if you just came into the room, if you just entered here, you did not check in, over to my right, your left, there's a check-in table. We need you to check in so you too can be a part of the day's gifts of the day. So please check in. All righty. So our next guest is going to be virtual. This is Dr. Michelle Hamlet, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before she comes on the screen and share with you and talk about the program and HBCUs and how you can be a participant and how it's important that HBCU students be a part of the program. So Dr. Michelle Hamlet started working at NIH in 2006 as the first training program coordinator at the National Human Genome Research Institute. In that capacity, she oversaw existing and developing new training programs and opportunities, most notable the NHGRI, Health Disparities Research Fellowship, and the first NIH Community College Day. Dr. Hamlet has served as program director at the National Institute of Medical Science in the Division of Genetics and Developmental Biology, where she oversaw basic research and postdoctoral training portfolios in cell cycle regulation and in the Division of Training. Workforce Development and Diversity, where she oversaw undergraduate and graduate student programs. Dr. Hamlet then worked as a program director at the National Institute of Nursing Research in Symptom Science and Genetics branch overseeing clinical and preclinical portfolios focused on symptom biology, symptom assessment, and symptom clusters. Michelle now works at the NIH All of Us Research Program as branch director for the Healthcare Provider Organization, branch within the Division of Cohort Development. Michelle earned a BSLA in French from Georgetown University, a master's in zoology at Howard University, and a PhD in cell and developmental biology from Harvard University. She conducted postdoctoral research at St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Without further ado, I bring you Dr. Hamlet.
I'm just going to start talking. Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Hamlin, and it's a real pleasure to be here talking to you today. Oh, good. That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, so it's a real pleasure to be here. I want to thank you for the invitation. It's a real honor to speak about it. May I have the next slide, please? Okay, I'm assuming the next slide is up. Amen. So the goals of the day are for me to give a brief bio about myself, tell you about my journey to get a PhD in cell and development biology. I also want to give you an overview of all the research program. I want to share the promises for participants, researchers, and providers who participate in the research program, and take a couple minutes to share the status of all this research program. Now, I will say I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions and comments. So if I can have the next slide, should say brief bio, and the slide after that, please. And so I couldn't address you without revealing a very important part of my life. And that is my very being here started at Spelman in Morehouse College. So you see my Greek mother on the left, who was a Spelman grad, and my father, who was a Morehouse grad, long time ago. He was able to go with basketball scholarship, and thank goodness they went to those schools. That's how we met. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about academic background because it was a very secure route to go from where I started to where I ended up. And so as you can see on the slide, hopefully, next slide, slide 5, talking about academic background. I was really good at languages in high school, but also in my biology class, did that thing. I don't even know if folks would do that previously, because science became so much. But back in my day, we do the cheat cell experiment where you look at the cheat cells under the microscope. That's the research done, right? And I was blown away when I saw that. I thought, oh my gosh, our bodies made up of these kind of things called cells. It was amazing. Next slide. So even though seeing the epidermal cells under the microscope was an epiphany, there's some concerns. I did very poorly in my math classes. I did really poorly on SATs, really any standardized testing did not do well. I didn't know any black scientists, and what is a scientist anyway? But I knew I was good in languages. So, at the next slide, I went to Georgetown to get a baccalaureate degree. That's right. To get a baccalaureate degree in Bachelor of Science and Language Arts. So I was a French major and a biology minor. And I kept the biology interest, so I was a minor there. And at Georgetown, I met my first mentor, Dr. Ellen Henderson. I took biology class with her. I failed the first exam, a big, huge failure. And on the blue book, there's a big CD in red written on it. I thought, oh, gosh, they're telling me, how to get a Georgetown, why are you here, please go away. But no, just the opposite happened. She took me under her wing and she helped me realize it wasn't that I didn't know the information, I just didn't know how to apply it. In her exam, she was asking about setting up experiments to ask particular questions about something that's happening in nature. I never learned biology that way. I learned the memorize and regurgitate method of science, and it really changed my life, changed my world. And so after I finished my undergrad, I wanted to finish in 4 years. But that meant I had to get a master's because I had to take classes that I didn't take, science classes that I had taken while I was a graduate student. And so, next slide please. I applied to a bunch of schools, master's program, and the only school that accepted me, and it was a provisional acceptance at that, was Howard University. And so my ability to stay at Howard was contingent upon my taking those core undergraduate courses, which I did. It was also a thesis master's, and so it was my first opportunity to do real research. And so I looked at the role of particular protein and the ability of an oocyte to move to the next phase of the cell cycle. And what I wanted to show here is discussing a model organism that I use, which is Ketopterus fermentaceous. Now, the great thing about this particular model is that the bottom, that bottom half, if you see that kind of orangey yellow, that's all oocytes. And the middle, not surprisingly, is all sperm. And so you can do pretty significant biochemistry when you have that large quantity of eggs and sperm. You can do biochemistry, you can understand how fertilization works, you can understand how cells are triggered to move through the stages of the cell cycle, etc. The good thing, though, about working with this model system is that I got to go to the new biological lab at Woods Massachusetts in the summers to collect these nasty things. Well, I didn't have to collect things, but it was an excuse to go there to get access to the model organism. So did that. It took me 3 years to get my master's because I spent a year taking undergrad courses. And that was perfectly fine with me. It's about staying focused on what my ultimate goal was, which was to get a PhD. May I have the next slide, please? And so it was time to think about PhD programs, and my mentor at Howard recommended that I go elsewhere to get a PhD so I can have a different range of experiences. And so he recommended that I apply to Harvard, which I did, and it was, I'm not gonna lie, it was rough. I think it would have been rough had I gone, no matter where I would have gone to graduate school, because my background was French. It wasn't biology. I did get a master's in zoology, but I didn't have that kind of core background that biology majors in undergrad would have. But that didn't stop me, no. Even though I did have a difficult time transitioning, I had professors ask me a question about something, and they'd say something like, "Oh yeah, let's see what you learned at Howard." This really disparaging, inappropriate comments that I received throughout graduate school. It was challenging. To address that, though, I helped to co-found an organization for graduate students and postdocs of color, and we were each other's support network, and it really played a huge role in my graduating, my finishing, and getting my PhD. And so my PhD work was to look at the role of particular protein and how it functions throughout the stages of development in the fly, in the fruit fly, and also in oogenesis. And so the figure at the top, the very top, shows wild type egg case, and a very deformed egg case formed when there's overexpression of one of these proteins that I studied. And so it had an effect, again, throughout development, in the larval stage, shown in the middle panel, and in wing development, shown in the bottom panel. And so it was the research and that support network that got me through graduate school. So I finally finished. That took 8 years. And I'm giving you these timelines, not to frighten you, because I hope not to discourage you, but to let you know that sometimes life happens and things don't go exactly as you thought you would, but keep moving forward anyway as best you can. May I have the next slide, please? And so I did a postdoc at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And there I developed different ways to insert transposons into the genome of frog embryos to develop an internal mutagenesis system. And so transposons jump around in the genome in organisms. And the idea is you make that transposon jump around and hopefully end up mutating a gene, a collection of genes that are involved in my case, I was interested in studying hematopoiesis, so the early stages of blood cell development was of interest to me. It took a very long time. It took a minute to get the system going. And in fact, by the time I left the lab, they hadn't started that genetic screen as yet. But I felt good knowing that I had a role in developing this model organism and a particular type of frog, not Xenopus laevis that you might be used to, but Xenopus tropicalis. May I have the next slide, please? And so as I was finishing my postdoc, I was thinking, I don't know if I want to do this bench thing. I love science, I love research, but I didn't, as my husband later told me, he's like, you don't have the temperament for the lab. And at first I was mad, and then I was like, he's right. And that means that, I don't do well with failure. And that happens in the lab. The experiments don't work, you get frustrated. But it is hard to beat that feeling when you make an observation for the first time and you're the first person ever to observe a particular phenomenon. That was amazing. So I still wanted to have that experience, but wondered if there was another way I can get that same joy outside of the lab. And so I found myself at the NIH, where I've been since 2006. I started out as a training program coordinator at the National Human Genome Research Institute, and my role was to help oversee individuals who were involved either at the postdoc level, postbac level, summer internship program students who came to NIH to do work. I was heavily involved in developing student programs to particularly encourage individuals from underrepresented backgrounds to participate in these programs. I then moved into a program officer role. That's someone who basically oversees a portfolio of grants in a particular field. So at NIGMS, I had covered grants in cell cycle regulation. And I also oversaw grants in student development programs. So MARC, RISE, Bridges to Baccalaureate or Bridges to Doctorate, some of those names might sound familiar to you. I helped to manage some of those programs. I then moved on to the Institute of Nursing Research, also still at NIH as a program officer. And there I got a chance to oversee grants that were in an area I wasn't familiar with, and that's clinical research. I didn't know anything about clinical research, but it really opened my world to how clinical research works. What are the unique challenges around clinical research relative to model organism research? And a little over a year ago, I transitioned over to the All of Us research program, where I am a branch director in a division whose job it is to enroll participants into the All of Us program. May I have the next 2 slides, please? And could I get a sense of how much time I have left? If someone could put that in the chat, that would be helpful. And so this slide talks about what the All of Us program is. I'm thinking that many of you might be familiar with the program. I won't read the slide, but the bottom line is, the way I see it, it's an opportunity to build a large cohort of individuals who fully represent the nation. And so anyone who resides in the United States can participate in the All of Us research program. So why does that matter? What does that really mean to be a participant in the All of Us program? Well, as a participant, you would play a critical role in the overall mission of the All of Us program. And may I have the next slide, please? Should be slide 14. And the mission is to accelerate health research and medical breakthroughs, enabling individualized prevention, treatment, and care for all of us. And so the idea then is, not only is a participant someone who donates biosamples, who completes health surveys, et cetera, we hope and anticipate that participants can play a role in some of the decisions that are made regarding, let's say, the type of data that are collected in the program. So for example, All of Us funded programs are required to have participant advisory boards or community advisory boards, which I think is critical because it ensures that the community has a say in significant decisions that are made within the All of Us program. May I have the next slide, please? And so another big plus of the All of Us program, okay, thank you, Dr. Johnny. Another significant part of the All of Us program is on slide 15. It's diversity at the scale of 1 million or more people. And so the idea is to enroll 1 million people, preferably more. But very importantly, that there's representation of diversity that reflects the diversity of the United States. This is incredibly important and something that I think is quite unique to the All of Us program, having a cohort so large and so diverse at the same time. I had mentioned about the focusing on participants as partners. I talked about that a little bit. The longitudinal design of the program is unique. And so the idea is that once you become a participant in the program, you stay a participant in the program for up to 10 years or longer, if you like. This would be an open resource for everyone. You don't have to be a scientist to access the data. There are tiers of access, which is important for privacy concerns and security concerns. But there is an open database that you could check out right now and see what kind of data have been collected thus far. May I have the next slide, please? And so this is a quick walkthrough of what it means. What's the participant journey? What am I doing? What am I contributing? And so starting at the left, you would provide consent and to participate in the study, but also consent to for the program to access your electronic health records. Again, this is all very secure. We have very stringent security policies in place to protect people's data. We ask you to complete participant surveys. We collect physical measurements from you, for example. We ask for biosamples, blood or saliva or urine. And in some cases, what we're building up is collecting data from your Fitbit or other wearable devices that we can use to enrich our database of information. Next slide, please. And so how do you get involved? Either through a direct volunteer network, where you go online and you sign up. Or you can do it possibly through your healthcare provider organization, depending on where you're located. You might be able to connect that way. May I have the next slide, please? So I think this is, to me, the most important slide to share with you. And the promise for the participants. So you see hopefully you can see the bullets there about improving the health of future generations, learn more about your own health, ability to access your data, ensuring that your community is included in the studies, research opportunities become available through the All of Us Research Program, meet others like you. But most importantly to me is that your participation guarantees that studies that are conducted using the data that you as a participant and others provide will ensure that outcomes will be relatable to you and not to the typical, when you think of clinical studies and clinical research, clinical trials, it's a very homogeneous population. And the outcomes of those studies show the effect of, let's say, a drug for that particular very narrowly defined population. It doesn't really help us necessarily know how the drug or whatever the intervention is might impact other communities and individuals from other backgrounds. Well, the All of Us program has assurance in their aggressive efforts to make sure that the database reflects the United States. That is so terribly and critically important. May I have the next slide? So very quickly, I'm going to breeze through these next few slides. One, the other value of being a participant is that you do get genetic information returned to you. So you get non-health genetic traits returned to you. One of them is whether or not you can taste, I can't remember if it's cilantro or something like that. Just fun little pieces of information that you can glean from your genome. But you also can get health-related genetic trait information as well. That is going to be launched in full later this year. May I have the next slide, please? Slide 21. The point of this slide is to show that there's a grand opportunity for researchers as well. So I alluded to the richness of the data, the fact that the data will be longitudinal, so you can really ask compelling questions about, let's say, incidence of, let's say, a particular disease over time in a given population. We all know that longitudinal studies really are critical, especially if you're doing human subjects research, to really get an understanding of how a phenomenon is unfolding over time. You'll be able to get that, and not only get that, but with a very large sample size. And we know that sample size is a very important consideration when thinking about clinical studies. And so I'm actually going to skip over the next few slides that talk about, actually, that's not true. Let me show you, if you would please go to slide 23, where it talks about the public data browser. So this is open to everyone. And so you can go to that site listed there, databrowser.researchallofus.org. If you have your camera out, or your phone, or the camera with the phone attachment, you can grab a snapshot of the code, and it will take you to this public database, and you can see the kind of information we've gathered thus far. And because it's open, you don't need a login or password or anything like that. And so in your spare time, which is probably limited because you're studying, it is worth taking a look to see what's out there. And so I'm going to finish, if we could skip please to slide 27, that has the status of the All of Us research program. And that gives you a broad overview of where we are regarding the number of participants that are in the All of Us program thus far. So over 480,000 participants. Of those participants, 355,000 have provided biosamples. Another over 300,000 have completed the initial steps of the program, which include completing some just overall general health surveys, that kind of thing. And nearly 300,000 have contributed their electronic health records. And so with that, I'm actually going to stop, and I'm really hoping that there is time for questions, because that's really why I'm here, is to address your questions. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope that my contact information is available, because you can consider me an NIH contact, and if you have any questions about NIH in general, you're welcome to contact me. So it looks like there are no questions. Okay, then. Well, if there are no questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If you want to talk about your career prospects, career aspects of your career, or you want to learn more about NIH in general or training programs at the NIH, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And again, I really thank you for your time today.
All right, we want to thank Dr. Hamlet for her presentation. Thank you so much. A lot of great information working with the NIH, and we have actually a special message from another individual that works with the NIH, and I'll give him a brief introduction, and again, his message will come virtually as well. This is Dr. Kareem Watson, and he's the Chief Engagement Officer of the All of Us Research Program at the National Institutes of Health. In his role, he will lead the Division of Engagement and Outreach, overseeing the program's efforts to foster relationships with participants, community partners, researchers, and providers across the United States. His focus will be on engaging people in populations who have been left out of the medical research in the past and inviting them to help drive new biomedical discoveries. Kareem comes to all of us from his role as an Associate Executive Director of the Miles Square Health Center, a group of federally qualified health centers in Chicago, affiliated with the University of Illinois Hospital and Health Sciences System. He has served as an Associate Director of Community Outreach and Engagement for the University of Illinois Cancer Center and as a Research Assistant Professor in the University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health. Beyond his work with UIC, he has served as a co-lead of the All of Us Engagement Core at the McMurray Vanderbilt Alliance, cultivating positive relationships with the program's participant ambassadors. Kareem holds a doctorate of health science, a master of science in basic medical research, and a master's in public health. He served as a principal investigator on multiple projects, including those funded by the National Cancer Institute and the National Institute of Minority Health and and health disparities, and the All of Us Research Program. His expertise in community academic partnerships is also supported in his role as a board chair of the Community Campus Partnerships for Health. His contributions have earned him recognitions by the Chicago Urban League, the American Heart Association, and the Longevity Foundation, and others. And without further ado, I bring you Dr. Watson.
I'll start with why it's so important to have this conversation at Paulding, and why it's so important to have this conversation with students and researchers of color. because one thing I always like to say is that the messenger matters. We know that there's been research that shows that in science and in other areas, they call it cultural congruency, meaning that people are more likely to understand and be compliant with, and more important, build trust with researchers, providers, and even faculty that reflect the lived experience of the person delivering the message. What does that mean in a nutshell? Sometimes it means FUBU. It means for us, by us. And too often, we're on the cusp and the margins of research. I want to share with you a startling statistic. As Jennifer read my bio, I've been very fortunate and blessed to have a successful research career prior to joining the NIH. And part of that was due to intentional mentoring and sponsoring that I had from African-American researchers like Dr. Rick Kittles, a famous African-American geneticist at City of Hope in California, and my mentor who I did my postdoc with, Dr. Robert Wynn. Dr. Wynn is one of only about 2 cancer center directors in the entire country that is African-American. He's at the VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, Macy Cancer Institute. And it was so powerful and so important and an honor and privilege for me to be able to do my postdoc and be able to be mentored by Dr. Wynn and Dr. Kittles and countless other African-American men, because one, I was able to see directly in their lived experience how there could be a place for me. And there's an old adage that says, when you can see it, you truly can be it. And I really love what your president is doing there at the university, because what he understands is that this concept of being the only, being the first, that comes with a heavy burden. And that burden all the time doesn't allow you to achieve and succeed in the way that you can do and operate at your maximum potential, because you're navigating those things of what it means to be the only, what it means, that burden that it means to have on your shoulder of being the first in your family. While it's always an honor to be the first of something, and it's a privilege sometimes to be the only, it comes with a burden. And when we don't want that in the scientific community. But the statistic I want to share with you is that prior to joining the NIH, I was fortunate to receive what's called an NIH R1 research grant. That's the gold standard. That's like the Oscars, if you will, of research. But the thing is that put me in a very small minority of researchers. Less than 2% approximately 2% of researchers that get R1s are African Americans. And that's the same statistic that we see when we think about the Oscars and other areas. And that should not be the case, because we know it's been demonstrated that when questions are developed, when research questions are developed by researchers that reflect the lived experience and the cultural congruency of the population that they're serving, we know that we have better health outcomes. Our populations are more likely to participate, and we end up really trying to address those gaps and those disparities that exist in health. I'll give you a couple real life examples of why it's so important for African Americans to be leading how we're asking these research questions. My personal lived experience has been impacted by cancer since I was a young child. My birth mother actually died from complications of breast cancer in the mid 80s. Grew up in a small town in Michigan. Both of my parents migrated up north to the south. My mother was from Mississippi. My dad was from Arkansas. And like many Blacks at that time, if you haven't read The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkinson, I highly encourage you to read that book, because it's a perfect example to talk about how many African Americans came up north. And so my dad worked in the automobile industry trying to create a better life for his family. My dad had no formal education, but wanted to make sure that his children and his family had access to things, a better life. So lo and behold, when my mother got breast cancer, you can imagine how that really challenged the things that my dad was dealing with and that he was going through. And so what it really did for us as a family, had to teach us how to navigate a healthcare system. We didn't have access to clinical trials. There was no innovative or late-breaking drugs that my mother had access to. And unfortunately, she ended up losing her battle to breast cancer and leaving my dad to raise us. But fast forward, my dad gets remarried. And my new mother, I don't say stepmom, it's my new mom, has challenges within the healthcare system. And several years later, my dad then gets complications. He gets diagnosed with colorectal cancer and diabetes. And in 2010, my dad actually died from complications of colorectal cancer and diabetes. And medicine was not precise for my father. There was no one asking questions about his family history. Jennifer gave that great example of how her glasses are precise for her and that she can't just take off her glasses and give them to someone else because that would not be precision medicine. It's the same for cancer treatments. What we now know about colorectal cancer is that African Americans need to be screened often earlier. We need to be having conversations with our doctors about our family history, about first degree relatives, whether that's a mother, father, sister, brother, or other family members, even other degree relatives like our uncles and our grandparents. What cancers have they had and when were they diagnosed with those cancers? So fast forward, not only was my father impacted by a complication of colorectal and diabetes, last April of 2021, my oldest brother died from complications of colorectal cancer. And it was so difficult for me to navigate my brother's transition at that time because I was actually doing a research study on colorectal cancer screening with Black men. I was working with barbers, I was working with fraternity members, I was working with faith leaders because I understood that they had this concept that Black men were quote unquote hard to reach in clinical trials. As a researcher, I've never had an issue reaching Black men in my studies. I've never had a research issue with Black men trusting me to be engaged in research because I've always built relationships with communities prior to engaging those communities in research studies. I've always talked about the importance of what happens when we're not at the table, how medicine is not precise for us if we're not part of asking the questions and generating the data. So when I had to navigate the loss of my brother from colorectal cancer, what was striking to me was how the healthcare system, my other family, I'm the youngest of 9 children, and I had to be the one telling my other siblings to go get screened, go get their colonoscopies, make sure they're talking to their doctor about diet and lifestyle, because they weren't their physicians and their healthcare providers were not having those conversations with them in and of itself. And I'll end with this example of I'm also doing the work that I was doing. It was also at the height of Chadwick Boseman's untimely death from colorectal cancer. And I was engaging a group of Black men, and I was calling them citizen scientists. It's not a name that I created. It was a concept that was created by one of my community partners at Project Brotherhood. Project Brotherhood is one of the oldest clinics and community-based organizations on the south side of Chicago, working with and for Black men to develop screening, prevention, and other holistic health services for Black men. And I'm working with Project Brotherhood to develop this citizen scientist program. What we did is that we got everyday Black men, like I said, that were barbers, pastors, member of fraternities, member of the Mason groups, just active leaders in their communities. And we trained these Black men how to be advocates to go out and engage other Black men to be an active participant in their healthcare. So doing one of the trainings that we had for these African-American men around colorectal cancer as citizen scientists, I had an expert on there, African-American surgeon, Dr. John Stewart, a Howard University alumni. Dr. Stewart was on there talking to these Black men about when and why they should get screened for colorectal cancer. He told them that the American Cancer Society had changed the age guideline from 50 to 45. There was one participant in the program who said, well, Dr. Stewart, my doctor told me I don't qualify to get screened for colorectal cancer because I'm not old enough. And Dr. Stewart had to remind that person, he said, no, your doctor may not even be aware that the guidelines have changed. And so, in the spirit of the Zoom world, this particular citizen scientist actually called his doctor, while he was on the phone and said, you need to give me a colonoscopy, I need to get screened. And the doctor told that participant, actually, you don't qualify, you're not old enough, you're not 50. And he said, no, a Black doctor just told me that the guidelines changed and that many primary care providers are not aware that the guidelines have changed. Long story short, that young man went on to get screened for colon cancer and ended up finding a polyp. And that polyp, had it not been removed, could have grown on to become a cancerous polyp, but it was removed and prevented. And I like to tell that story because what if I didn't have a Dr. Stewart that was engaging other African-American men and talking about this? What if that African-American man didn't have the agency to call his primary care provider and advocate for the screening he needed and would have waited for several years? He could have been one of those statistics that we see with African-American men being diagnosed with late stage prostate cancer, what we saw in the untimely death of Chadwick Boseman. And you may say, well, Kareem, what does all this have to do with the All of Us Research Program? It has absolutely everything to do with the All of Us Research Program, because as Jennifer noted, we are building one of the most diverse data sets and databases that exist. Unfortunately, cancer research has often only included less than 6% of African Americans in clinical trials who are eligible to participate in research. What this means, it means that when we develop treatments, when we develop interventions, when we think about ways that we need to come up with screening guidelines, if those things are developed without the data of people who carry the greatest burden of disease on those research populations, we're developing interventions and treatments for you without you. And what that means is that the medicine will not be precise for you. And the last example I'll give to you before I open up for questions is another example that I had. And this may sound like another challenging outcome, but it actually had a beautiful ending. My new mother was diagnosed with lung cancer while I was doing another lung cancer screening research program. So my research portfolios existed across prostate cancer screening, colorectal cancer screening, lung cancer, breast cancer, and cervical cancer screening. What I did is I worked with community members, I worked with primary care providers to come up with interventions that could get community members, primarily Black and Brown community members, into screening, do interventions that could get them screened early and on time, and begin to develop some of those messaging that could begin to disrupt the barriers that we have in getting screened. And so I work with churches and other faith groups and other community members. So imagine my surprise when my mother and my family member called me and said my mother was going back and forth to the doctor because she was having some chest pains and some cough, uncontrolled cough. My mother was never a smoker, never worked in an environment that would have, so we thought, exposed her to the risk of lung cancer. But I had to advocate as her son for her to get aggressive screenings to make sure that nothing was going on. Lo and behold, they found a nodule, which was a tumor, and we found out that it was late-stage lung cancer. Right before they came up with a treatment plan for my mother that was going to be in a very aggressive treatment plan that would include chemotherapy because she didn't qualify for having the tumor surgically removed. But before they started the chemotherapy on my mother, I knew as a lung cancer researcher that there had been some late-breaking, innovative treatment mechanisms for lung cancer treatment, And that meant that they simply had to take a sample of that tumor with a needle, a biopsy, and then test that tumor to see if it qualified for certain genetic mutations that will qualify for these innovative chemotherapy treatments. They were not going to do that. They were just going to start this chemotherapy, just like a boom, let's just hit it and hope and pray that this chemotherapy works. But they didn't have to do that. There were innovative treatments out there. So lo and behold, they end up, and I called my boss, Dr. Robert Wynn, who was the cancer director, and I talked to Dr. Wynn, and Dr. Wynn said, Kareem, don't let them start treatment until they do these molecular marker testing. I know that may sound like a big word, but it's basically a test in a lab that they could develop a chemotherapy program that was precise for her. And lo and behold, they did that. And she qualified for this innovative chemotherapy treatment. And what the beauty of that is that as a result of her qualifying for that chemotherapy treatment, it extended her quality of life for almost 18 months. And when I say she ended up losing her battle to lung cancer in March of 2020, but it was a beautiful process because what it did is it allowed us as a family to say goodbye to our mother. It allowed her to die with dignity. It allowed us to put her in hospice and allowed her to transition under her own terms. While many families don't get the beauty and the blessing of that. Many families are losing their loved ones without the ability to say goodbye, losing their loved ones without those loved ones being able to have a say-so in how they transition. And my mother was able to plan her services, tell us what she wanted to wear, what we wanted to wear to her funeral, tell us who she wanted to preach at her funeral services and what songs she wanted to be sung. And that may sound like a sad outcome to some, but what the reason why it's a beautiful outcome to me is because medicine worked in her favor. Although it didn't cure her lung cancer, it allowed her to have an extended better quality of life. And for us as a family to really be able to take part in understanding her care. And it's so important that we have researchers that reflect our community. So I'm thankful that you all announced our Minority Student Research Symposium. And our partnerships with organizations like the Black Greek Letter Consortium allows us to ensure that we are creating a pipeline of researchers like students. My hope and my prayer is that there are some students in the audience today that hears both my stories, hears the opportunities that exist in all of us research database, and that they say, I don't just want to sign up as a participant, but I want to become a researcher. I want to be the one asking the questions. I want to be the one that's going to be developing interventions, treatments, and cures that can begin to address disparities that plague African American communities disproportionately. So I want to open it up for questions now about how we can be a part of, really be a part of setting the difference, be a part of the solutions in addressing this issue of diversity in clinical trials. Thank you again to Jennifer and the organizers of this event and leadership at Paul Quinn for giving me the opportunity to talk about the All of Us Research Program. Thank you.
All right, let's give it up for Dr. Watson. I mean, that was a powerful.
Do we have time for questions?
Yes, can you hear me?
All right, that scared me. That is a powerful message that Dr. Watson brought to us. I want to give a shout out to our partners back there, Morehouse School of Medicine and Emory. Thank you so much for being here this whole day and sitting up there and just providing a lot of information for the students and for the audience that's here. We just appreciate you, and I wanted to shout that out to you right now. So thank you so much for your time. Next, we will have coming forth to the stage will be Dr. Johnny Cruz Craig, an amazing individual that works directly with BGLC. She serves as our engagement counselor, and she can kind of talk about what that means for us. So without further ado, Dr. Cruz Craig.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all the partners. As JJ said, I do serve as the BGLC engagement counselor, which means I sort of serve as the liaison to help move this work into the community and engage our community about what all of us is and the value of all of us and why everybody should be a part of all of us. So I'm here today just to share with you a little bit about the data browser and the workbench. You heard some earlier in Dr. Hamlet's presentation. So I'll just simply go to the next slide and run through some things and share some opportunities with you about the All of Us Research Program and the data that's available to researchers and the researcher work path as we try to diversify that. Next slide, please. So here we're going to talk about diverse All of Us research cohort. Why is it important? First of all, we talked about why the data isn't diversified. But we also need researchers to be diversified in looking at the data, doing the active studies to advance healthcare. So this is the whole workbench piece of the All of Us Research Program is to help get the researchers to the data as we get the people in the database so that they can do the actual studies and get us stuff that works for us in our genetic makeup. So next slide, please. And so this is just showing you why it's important. Dr. Hamlet talked about the promise of researchers, and we know repetition helps us to understand more. So you just see it again here. I won't go through all of them because she talked about them. Next slide, please. Here, the All of Us Research Program, how it works. So you basically see how it's broken down. You have the researchers to come. You have universities that become what they call DURAs, which means they register to get on this workbench, to get access to this data, and researchers at those institutions or organizations can then access the data to start doing studies. You can get the public one that's open to everyone, which is the data browser, but then you have different levels of tiers in which you can access to get to more de-identified data, but gives you a larger span of things to look at and variables there. So that's sort of how it works, and it is ongoing. This program is 10 years long, and so I think we're in year 5 now, which actually is really beefing up the whole researcher side of it. Next slide, please. Now, the Research Hub. There was a video here, and you can find it actually on YouTube. We're not going to play it, but it sort of tells you a little bit about what the Research Hub is, a little more, and breaks it down from the lens of people who actually are doing this community work. Next slide. You can go to the next slide as well. Keep going. All right, I talked about the tiered data, the free data, which is the data browser where everybody can get to. This talks a little bit more about the tiered data access levels and how you get in there to do the discoveries. And you're going to have another presenter to come after me that really goes deeper into this. So I'm not going to take that time to do that. So go forward, please. The Research Hub website. This is important, researchallofus.org.
You can go here to learn more about the research component of all of us and how all of that is working as far as the researchers, the organizations, how you get to the data, what's in the data, and actually see some of the active projects, because you have researchers actively working in with this data right now. And Dr. Mueller will be coming soon to share a little bit about active projects. Go ahead, please. So you have public and restricted. I just talked about that. Next slide. Then you have the data browser at researchallofus.org. That is the site you go to actually access the free data that you can access without having those tiered control levels access. So you can go to that site to see some of that and see some of the tools that are there to utilize the queries and what you're looking for. For example, you can go to the next slide. There's All of Us does a lot around mental health. We took a lot of time this morning to have that mental health panel. And that's critical because we know in our community that mental health is one of the number one topics that we must continue to talk about. But All of Us is also utilizing the data being collected from the partners in the program to look deeper into those mental health topics. You can go to the next slide. They go into links, looking at the data that comes in as for schizophrenia, bipolar, just to see what's coming in on the surveys from the actual participants. Next slide. And they are able to put that out there and give you a glimpse into the people that are part of the program and how they're moving through and how they're being affected by and what's going on in their life in regards to that mental health. So that whole data component around mental health is huge with the All of Us research program. Thus, why we have this panel. Thus, why this whole rooted in resilience is rooted and talked about mental health, because it's so very critical. Next slide. And what you're seeing are just really glimpses of the data that you can find in these databases that talk directly to the mental health. Next slide. Here is the workspace. I'm sure Dr. Mueller will talk about that a little bit more. But when you actually are a researcher in that space, you get to create your workspace to get that data, to do those studies and things of that nature. Next slide. Here again is just showing you how to build those cohorts in the data sets. Next slide. Latest data releases. It shows you that you get the surveys and sort of what a participant count is with that. Physical measurements, EHR, which is electronic health records, Fitbits. So all of this data is also within that data browser, that workbench. Next slide. So now the researcher convention, I'm going to shift because I want to share opportunities. So this is a pipeline being built. This is an absolutely amazing opportunity for college students, high school students, middle school students to be able to see themselves in this space to become a researcher. So some of the opportunities to, connect to that pipeline, to connect to these opportunities are going to be coming up next. Next slide. So what we have is the researcher convention, which was the first this year, but last year we had the Minority Student Research Symposium. So this is where you have students to access that free data, and some actually get the tiered data that they can have access to if their mentor has access. And they take the data and they actually do posters. They create posters that are judged, that are put into the MSRS for people to look at, do people choice voting. And I'm going to show you what that looks like visually here in a second. But that's an opportunity. It just happened for this year, but for 2023, the dates are already set. It will be a 2-day convention. So if you're in that space of research, connect with MSRS so that you can keep up with when applications will become open for students, when applications will come open for the mentors, and how that's going to look so that you can connect to this pipeline. Next slide, please. And these are just some of the posters and some of the things of the look of MSRS. This was the flyer that was utilized this year. Next slide. These were some of the winners from last year. Don't have the winners from this year, but you can also go to the researcher convention site. You can still register, and you can go into the site, see all the posters, see all the presentations, and see the winners. But these are the 2021 winners. Next slide. And I'm just going to show them. You can keep going. And you can see we have a diverse group of winners. We had them from a couple HBCUs, someone from Puerto Rico. Very, very, very wonderful symposium. Next slide. All right. Science Day is also a piece of the Researchers Convention. This is where researchers go onto that workbench. They have those active projects, and they actually can submit to become a part of Science Day to present on their research. So that's another way to plug in, another opportunity for researchers, especially as we're trying to diversify that whole field. Next slide. So here is just a visual for you to see what MSRS looked like this year.
And again, you can go and register at the research links, which should be in the chat, or we can give it to you if you stop by the table. And you can go in there and see what it looked like. Though you weren't there on the live day, you can still go back for 30 days, I believe, and see what's going on. Can we hit play on this? And again, this is just a visual to show you what the platform looked like, because we're in this world, so it was virtual. You went in, you saw the lobby, this was the agenda, and you'll see a couple other things to come up on this video from that actual environment. So again, that's the lobby. The exhibit hall is here. So you had exhibit halls with all of the booths of different posters of students and other things that are surrounding the All of Us Research Program. You had a booth where you could actually go do the People's Choice Award. So as an attendee, you had a voice. You were able to look at posters and then go vote on those posters to help get that People's Choice Award. And this is sort of just going through showing you. Now, these are some of the posters. So if you have someone around you, or if it's you that's in that space that want to get into this MSRS thing, get into that data, create posters and create projects, this is what it looks like. So I thought it was very important to show you a visual of this, because this is the end game. When you first fill out that application to become a student or a mentor, you don't really see the end game. But this is the end game of what it all ends up being and what you will be a part of. So it's a wonderful opportunity. All right, we can go to the next slide. We can leave the video. Just wanted you all to see that, because I think it's very important to get a visual of what's going on. This is another opportunity. At the Cancer Center in Illinois, they're looking for postdoctoral students for a program. The deadline is May 1st for the applications. So if you're interested, go get that link, go look into it. If you know someone in that space, share it. These opportunities need to be shared far and wide so that we can get people connected to the opportunities to become one of the recipients or the people, the participants in these opportunities to help diversify this pipeline. Next slide. So the conclusions here: assembling the largest, richest biomedical database of its kind with plans for genomic data and comprehensive clinical information. Successfully engaging participants as partners, new data types continuing to be rolled out, and ancillary studies of specific populations of disease states possible, and will facilitate research across multiple disease states and could serve as controls for disease-specific studies that lack healthy controls. You see, I slowed it down there for those conclusions, right? That was purposeful, because a lot of the other stuff went quite fast, but this is the gist of it. This is the big picture. You heard something from Dr. Hamlet. You just heard some of the repetition here, and you're going to hear it again from Dr. Mueller. Why? Because we remember the things that are repeated for us, that's put in front of us more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And this program is very important. It's important for our future. It's important for our present. For those that are in those fields of research, that want to do research, don't even understand what research is, but that could just be their niche, and they don't understand that they could be their next scientist. So we have to expand the conversation, amplify the conversation, navigate the conversation, so that we can get our minority students into the places to become the researchers, and also to be a part of the All of Us research program to diversify the data. Why would you want to look at data that's not diversified? Makes no sense, right? Oxymoronic. So that is it for me. Next slide. And we're going to bring JJ back up here. And you see all the contact information here. And she's going to move us and introduce our next presenter, Dr. Mueller, who's going to go deeper for you about the All of Us Research Program workbench and actual projects that are going on right now. And you're going to see that it's very relevant. The topic that he's going to talk about, you're going to be like, somebody in my family may be dealing with that. So keep your ears attuned. Share out the live if you're virtual, because this next presentation you don't want to miss. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Cruz Craig. Yes, intentional. I love it. So moving right along, this is our last speaker for the day. And you always say the best for last, because it's important. And like Dr. Cruz Craig said, we need your undivided attention, because this is about us and it's about tomorrow. So Dr. Mueller, give you a little bit about him. Dr. Robert Mueller is a professor in the Department of Neurobiology at Morehouse School of Medicine. He was trained at the universities of Bristol and Oxford in UK before moving to the US in 2000. He moved to Morehouse School of Medicine in 2010. Dr. Mueller directs the genomics faculty at Morehouse School of Medicine and has developed novel genomics and bioinformatics training programs for graduate students. He collaborates locally with researchers at Emory, Georgia Tech, and CHOA to research stroke, epilepsy, sickle cell anemia, traumatic brain injury, and nationally and internationally with NASA researchers on space radiation injury and COVID-19 responses. He has published over 60 scientific articles and is funded by NIH and NSF. Dr. Robert Mueller.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rob Mellor. I'm from the United Kingdom, so please excuse the accent. I'll try speaking slower so you can understand me. And thank you for the wonderful, energetic introductions. That was marvelous. So today, what I'm going to do is talk about the use of the researcher workbench and how we can use it in research to ask novel questions of data that's been collected. So next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. Okay, so next slide, please. Wonderful. So, as you've all heard already today, the All of Us program, it's been running now for nearly 5 years. I'm actually a principal investigator of a consortium that's based in the Southeast United States, encompassing Morehouse School of Medicine, University of Florida, Emory University, and University of Miami. Next slide, please. So again, the goals of the All of Us program is to recruit over 1 million participants. We're currently around the 300,000 mark, so we've still got a long way to go. We're trying to obtain longitudinal health data, biospecimens. We have continuous participant engagement as well. And the goal of this is to create the richest data set available for us to be able to ask questions of health and disease. The other part of this program, unlike some other programs, is there's a goal of continuous participant engagement as well. And this means return of results to participants in a meaningful, useful manner. We're currently in a program where we're trying to return genomic data results to participants. And that involves both more life, health style type genomic markers. And there's also goals for the return of health relevant genomic markers as well. Next slide. So we were fortunate enough to be invited to participate in an early access demonstration program project. So we can actually see part of the researcher workbench here. So the goals of the early access demonstration program was to verify the data that was in the database with respect to known health data. Next slide, please. So as I say, we're aiming to validate data that's already known. So actual access to this data set now is available to any institution that has signed data use agreements with the All of Us program. And we're going to be looking at controlled tier data today. So that's not genomic data. We'll touch on that at the very end, but this is just health record data. So once you've performed training, they have a series of training modules that you have to pass to be able to gain access to this data. And the purpose of this is to ensure that the use of this data is ethical and you respect the participants who are contributing the data to this program. Next slide, please. So we then asked, okay, what do we want to actually use this data for? What do we want to really investigate? So my interest is in neuroscience, neurological disorders. And in particular, at the moment, we're very interested in Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease is a chronic neurodegenerative condition that affects many populations worldwide, seems to be getting worse as we have a more aged population. Now, the World Health Organization has identified hypertension or high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes as potential risk modifiers for dementias and Alzheimer's disease. Now, high blood pressure and diabetes are two disorders that seem to have a very strong prevalence in certain racial populations. And in particular, African Americans seem to have a very high incidence of hypertension, high blood pressure, and type 2 diabetes. So we were wondering then, well, okay, World Health Organization says that these two factors are risk factors for dementias and Alzheimer's. We know that there's heightened risk of these two modifying factors in minority populations. So does that then follow through that then there's an increased incidence of Alzheimer's disease in a minority population? Next slide, please. So our hypotheses were twofold. We wanted to use the workbench, number one, to validate national statistics for hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's and dementias, and then to test whether or not the risk factor associated with these two modifiable diseases actually came through into Alzheimer's. Next slide, please. Okay, so we then had to use the researcher workbench. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The first time you see the researcher workbench, there's so much information, it is almost, well, actually, it is overwhelming, especially to someone like myself. I'm a biomedical researcher, but there's a lot of information here. So it takes a couple of goes just to really get yourself organized and orientated to how we use the data. What we actually see is there's two main elements. There's the cohort data, and then for what we were using the EHR data sets. So the cohort chooser, basically you use this to define the population you're asking a question of: race, sex, age, etc. Then the actual data sets, this is the electronic health record data sets that then we would have to mine to find the patient electronic health record data to merge it together to then ask eventual questions. Next slide, please. And this is what it really looks like. So basically we had the all of us data set, and we then asked these two questions. So first we had to refine the participants within the age population that we were looking at, participants who actually had electronic health record, because you can only know what you know basically, so only patients who had electronic health records could we then ask whether they had dementia and other factors associated. We also wanted to make sure that we had participants whom we knew basic demographics, so that is, they'd actually reported their sex at birth, they'd reported what racial category they identify with. We also then went to the electronic health records. Now, what was unknown to me at the time when I started this project is there's a lot of different terms that physicians use for high blood pressure, not just hypertension, but there's a whole host of different disorders that all really relate to hypertension. Same with type 2 diabetes. Dementia was a little bit easier. We only actually had two conditions. So what we then had to do is we had to find all the electronic health record data that had patients, or participants, sorry, with hypertension, diabetes, dementia, and then we had to merge them two together. And that gave us our final data set that then enabled us to perform biostatistical analysis of this data. Next, please. Okay, so to begin with, what we wanted to do is just simply compare what do our statistics look like. So if we look at the United States, it's about approximately 70% of people in the US Census identify as being white. Approximately 12% identify as African American, and 17% identify as Hispanic. Now, here's where we have certain challenges, because we consider being black or white or African American and Caucasian as being a racial category, but Hispanic is an ethnic category. So what we actually had to do is we had to play with the data to actually roll these elements all into a single category of self-identified race and ethnicity. So what we find in the all-levels data set is about 50% identify as white, 24% identify as African American, and 17% identified as Hispanic. So the Hispanic population were about similar to the national statistics, but we do actually see that we have a larger proportion of participants in the all-levels data set who identify as African American. Similarly, when we look at the national statistics for sex at birth, we see that it's typically about 50% male, 50% female. Well, in the all-levels data set, we actually see a slight enrichment, or a slightly larger number of people who identify as female. Next slide, please. So then what we did is we took our data and we looked at this age category of 40 to 80, where we'd start to expect to see patients with dementia. And then we just wanted to compare whether or not we saw similar profiles of age breakdown with the different self-identified race and ethnic categories. And what we actually find is in terms of older participants, this is participants aged 70 and above, we see a far larger proportion of those participants identify as being white or Caucasian compared with other race and ethnic categories. So this is a bit of a challenge for us because it then actually means that we've got a mismatched, unbalanced data set, and it may actually explain some of the observations we see later on. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we then decided to do is we then looked at the incidence of hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and dementia. So for this, what we had to do is we had to go to national statistics reported by national societies. So the O-levels cohort reported a 23% prevalence of hypertension or high blood pressure. Now, in the United States, the American Heart Association, using their guidelines, they identify about 23% of the population having hypertension. That sounds really good, but in actual fact, they've recently changed the criteria for what they say a person has hypertension for. So they've changed the blood pressure measurement, so actually it's reduced, and now you're deemed to have high blood pressure or hypertension. So actually now with that new criteria, it's closer to 45%. For diabetes, type 2 diabetes, we had an incidence of between, we have an incidence of 13.9%. 14% of people in the data set in our age group had type 2 diabetes. Again, the US statistics show it's between 10.5 to 26% depending on age. So we're kind of within the right ballpark figures for these two demographics of disease. However, with dementias, the all-of-us cohort only has 0.4% of the population have dementias. And you compare this to an estimated incidence of about 1.5% in the US population, and actually that typically is higher because it typically affects older people. So the dementia rates in the all-of-us data set are actually lower than in the national averages, and actually there's some potential explanations for this. One of the key components of the all-of-us program is that you have to be able to give consent to be part of the study. And one of the challenges is when you have people who have dementia, in particular severe dementia, they're no longer deemed to have the autonomy to be able to consent for a study. And so we're not actually allowed to recruit from those populations. So as a result, we are likely by design to see a lower incidence of people with dementia actually being in the all-of-us program at this time. However, remember, this is a longitudinal study. That is, it's looking forwards. So what we may find is as time goes by, we see a larger proportion of patients with dementia as the effects of time and aging take effect on this population. Next slide, please. So then what we wanted to know is, okay, World Health Organization says that if you have hypertension or you have diabetes, this will be a risk factor for you developing dementia. So what we did is we went through the data set and we said, okay, if a patient had dementia, did they have a past history of hypertension or type 2 diabetes? And what we found was yes. We saw a large proportion of our patients with dementia have a past history of diabetes and hypertension. But what's interesting is when we then said, well, wait a minute, what about if they've got hypertension and type 2 diabetes? Are these two additive risk factors? What we saw was a similar value as if you just had type 2 diabetes. So the question is well, is the effect of type 2 diabetes actually because most of those patients actually have hypertension? Next slide, please. And indeed, when we break down the data, it really would suggest that the majority of the effects of those patients who have type 2 diabetes, the majority of them actually have hypertension as well. Okay, so we now have data of looking at various different risk factors associated with type 2 diabetes, with having dementia. Next slide, please. So my collaborators at Georgia Tech, they're actually able to perform what's known as a risk analysis. They perform some linear modeling using some basic R programming of this data set that we had. And then they're able to then look at the risk of different factors on the incidence of the chance that you will have dementia. And what we found is that the two most highest risk factors was hypertension. That was the number one dominant risk factor. And the second one was age. The older you were, the higher the chance of having dementia. But the first and most common effect was having hypertension. Next slide, please. Now, what's interesting about this hypertension risk is actually the same across all SIRE categories. That is, in actual fact, we didn't see an effect of race within this population who have dementia. There was no enhanced incidence of dementia in African American population, which is kind of counter to what our original hypothesis was. Now, it could be simply because we don't have the numbers of patients. As I said earlier, we did see a reduction in the number of people who have both dementia compared to national statistics, and also aged population seems to be very low on minority participation as well. So that's a definite issue here. But the take-home message is this: hypertension is a modifiable risk factor. So if we can get a handle on hypertension, we may be able to get a handle on long-term effects of a population exposed to hypertension, i.e. certain dementias. Next slide, please. So you may be wondering why a genomics researcher got involved with basically an epidemiology study. Well, because the All of Us program is actually going to give us more than just electronic health record data. It's going to give us access to genomic data, and on a far larger scale than any of the previous genomic data sets that we currently have, for example, the UK Biobank or some of the Iceland Decode studies. This seemed like a very great opportunity for us at Morehouse School of Medicine to get ourselves ensconced within the researcher workbench so we could actually get access to genomic data, which would clearly have utility for the health equity research that we have at Morehouse School of Medicine. So in 2022, i.e. just in the last month, they actually released access to the genomic data in the controlled tier now and registered tier of the research workbench. And this includes over 100,000 EHR-linked whole genome data sets. That's a lot of data. And there's also additional microarray chip data for that as well. And approximately 50% associates with being underrepresented in biomedical research. So this is a treasure trove of a data set available to us. Next slide, please. My actual interest in this is because we have a challenge when we ask someone what race they identify with and what ethnicity, because when we have such yes-no answers, or black-white answers, quite frankly, it misses a lot of the diversity and the complexity of human population. So what we've actually been trying to do is trying to then, instead of use race as a category, we want to then use additional elements to help inform us with our research. And so what we're looking at is using genetic ancestry as opposed to just saying black and white. We want to understand proportions of admixture. We want to understand whether someone is predominant from a given ancestral background or from a mixed background. And the reason for this is when you're trying to tie genomic effects to a disease, understanding with more accuracy the actual ancestry of a patient or a participant is important. And so we're invited to take part through our collaborations with Georgia Tech researchers who helped us with the All of Us data project. We're actually invited to take part into one of the early access projects for genetics. And that is actually trying to use this ancestry determination in large-scale data sets. See, we can do it very easily on very small data sets. You don't need much compute power, but when you start having 100,000 data samples, the computers that you need become very enormous. And so we were trying to do this with an approach that should reduce the requirement of high capacity computational systems. And our actual goal is to use this in RNA sequencing, so transcriptome type studies that we're actually involved with using in our research at Morehouse School of Medicine. Next slide. So when we actually did this ancestry at large scale, what we find is there's quite a good correlation between self-identified racial and ethnic category data and what the genetic ancestry of these participants correlates to. So we actually do find that most people are self-reporting quite accurately. Next slide, please. This is important, it's very important in my opinion, because what we're actually discovering from the Human Genome Project is that human genetics is not so simple after all. So the first draft of the human genome was in around 2000. However, what we discovered is actually there were huge chunks missing, and actually only recently have we been able to sequence from one end of a chromosome to the absolute end of the other end of the chromosome. This was called the telomere-to-telomere project, and this is trying to then identify every single piece of DNA that was in the human genome. Now, when we first started doing the human genome, we realized something, that we really didn't have the tools to deal with the complexity of the human genome. And so what we identified was two people who may look very similar actually may have quite different genomes. They'll have insertions, deletions, rearranged positions of genes, etc. And this has actually been shown more recently. There was a deep sequencing study looking at humans of African descent. They were actually they were Hispanic African descent, which is very interesting. And what they did is they sequenced these patients that were in an asthma study up in the Northeast. And then they compared the DNA that they were getting to the current draft of the human reference genome. What they actually found was there was about 3 million additional bases of information. Now, the human genome is 3 billion bases, so it's actually about 0.1%, but that's still an awful lot of information. Now, our research actually suggests that a lot of this novel African pangenome data actually creates RNA and probably creates proteins. If it's creating RNA and proteins, it's probably involved in disease as well. So this is why it's critical to have diversity in these data sets. We're a very complex species. We have a lot of diversity genomically. And so if we don't have diverse data sets to be able to study disease, we won't really be able to get to the bottom of what is causing a disease. Next slide, please. And this is particularly important when you're studying diseases that have both genetic and environmental components to them. So I study stroke, epilepsy, Alzheimer's disease, traumatic brain injury. And so these clearly are places where you're going to have a coming together of both nature and genetics, as well as environment, social economics, social determinants of health, lifetime stress. So by using genetic ancestry, we're hoping that we can at least be able to identify what a genomic component to a disease is. And that then enables us to then maybe address the elephant in the room of what the actual social determinants of health impact on diseases as well. So with that, next slide, please. I'd just like to acknowledge the collaborators and people who I've been very fortunate to work with, both in the All of Us Data Project, people who work in my research lab, and also the funding that enabled us to do these studies. I include at the bottom, for those people who are interested in registering for the All of Us program through Morehouse School of Medicine, this is our web link. If you go there, they'll enable you to log in and register and become a participant to this quite exciting research program. With that, I'll happily take any questions. Okay, thank you.
Wow, that was absolutely fascinating. My goodness. Oh my God, that was great. Thank you so much, Dr. Mueller, for being here and participating in today's Rooted in Resilience Research Symposium. That concludes our day, y'all. We have received so much information. And if that, yes, so much wonderful information. And I would say if there was a theme for today, the theme for today is that we must get involved. We must get involved in some type of way for this to continue, for us to be part of the solution or be part of the discovery. We have to in some way get ourselves involved. I signed up 5 years ago and I do not regret it. Like I said, my story is that because of that program, I think it may not have saved my life completely, but it has allowed me to be able to talk to my family about our genetic makeup and how important that is, your genetic, your history, your medical history within your family. Because as a people, we don't share that. You know, we know that Big Mama had diabetes, but we don't know why she got it and all the things. But we have to be a part of this database. We have to be a part of the solution. So I would encourage you, all of you that's looking at this virtual, all of us in the audience, we have to do our part to be one in a million, because it's going to take all of us to make the difference. And it may not happen in my lifetime, but it will happen. And I know it will happen. So whatever we can add to the solution and to the discovery, that's what we need to be doing as a people. So I appreciate your time today. Wherever there's a pre, there's always a post, right? So all of us virtually, we do have a post survey that we would love for you and need for you to take. We're going to put that in the chat right now. We want you to take it now. And I'm going to give you time to do that right now. And for our wonderful event checker inners over here, we have a CR code that kind of totals up the day. It's a survey that talks about the entire day. So if you could pass that around so our audience right now can take a picture. That QR code is in behind. Yes, that one. It's behind the check-in sign. If we could take that around so we can do that here, so we can have you do that survey. And I'm going to give you time. And as I give you that time, I'm going to talk about the entire weekend. This was the beginning of the tail end of our Rooted in Research tour. And so tomorrow, let me put on my real eyes so I can read this. So tomorrow we want you to join us for Community Day. Community Day. So with Rooted in Resilience, we have the 3 C's. We have college, community, and church. So tomorrow is community. And the Community Day will be held at East Point downtown at the Commons, East Point Commons. And it will begin at 12 o'clock and it will end at 4 o'clock. So this is family friendly. This is for the community. We want you to all come. All come. Please come. There will be vendors. There will be entertainment. There will be opportunities, a lot of opportunities for you all. So we want you to come out to learn more about the program, to be able to interact with the community as we talk about us being champions for our own health. And then Sunday at 12 noon Eastern time, we will have our inspirational service that will be virtual. And it will be on MPAC HQ, Facebook, and YouTube. We will stream it live, but we have taken all of our members, our Divine Nine organizations, and they have taken part in this spiritual extravaganza. I'm going to call it that. So we want you to tune in on Sunday at 12 noon, MPAC HQ, Facebook, and YouTube. We want you to join us in that. This has been a fabulous, amazing day. And as I need one, you come up here. I have had 2 workers who have stayed, they've been kind of rotating, that have stayed to the end. And so I would like to give you both a little token of love for today. Come on up here. Because they hung in. We want you to tell us your name and your major and all that good stuff.
My name is Austin Howell. I'm a graduating senior majoring in mass media arts with a concentration in public relations.
And as our friend is doing his job, do you know what his major is and where he's from and all that good stuff?
Bryson Carter, he's a sophomore majoring in mass media arts as well.
I appreciate y'all. I really do. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's what I'm talking about. This is our tomorrow. These are some researchers. Some research for tomorrow. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. I will see you tomorrow at Community Day. Bring your family, bring your children. We have a bounce house. We have a kids zone. Come and be on the bounce houses for the children. Don't get on the bounce houses. Some of y'all in here don't get on the bounce houses. We want to see you tomorrow and want you to view on Sunday. So thank you. God bless you and good afternoon.